us know. All right, great. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much. This is a conference meeting of the Council of the Township of Montclair. It's being broadcast live on Channel 34 and is streaming live on Montclair TV 34 YouTube channel. It is available on demand and will be rebroadcast. This meeting is called pursuant to the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Act, and this meeting was included in the annual notice on the meeting schedule as set forth in Resolution R-21-17 adopted by the Council at its regular meeting of December 1, 2020. Advertised in our official newspapers December 31st, 2020 and January 7, 2021. Posted on the bulletin boards outside of the municipal building and has remained continuously posted. In addition, a copy of the annual notice has been available to the public and is on file in the Township Clerk. And with that, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Clerk, a roll call, please.
Councillor Cummings?
Present.
Deputy Mayor Hurlock?
Present.
Councillor Price Abrams?
Present.
Councillor Russo? Councillor Schlager?
Here.
Councillor Yacobelis?
Present.
Mayor Spiller?
Present. Thank you. As we move through the agenda with flexibility, first, approval of minutes. There have been presented to the Council the minutes of July 21st, 2020, August 4th, 2020, August 25th, 2020. And are there any corrections or additions to the minutes, modifications? Seeing none, I know we've reviewed them. So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you. We've adopted the minutes. I know we have a couple different things here. We've got a couple proclamations, but also mindful of we've got a couple special guests, their time as well, and I think we'll come back to the proclamations after that. We have with us tonight PSE&G, to the public that's out there. I know that many are happy that we have them on. Certainly, Joe McQueen, who's our liaison here in the township and does a lot of work in terms of connecting with us and helping us to answer resident questions and so forth, is with us tonight. Certainly, we want to receive him, listen to what he has to say, and of course, obviously let him answer some of the questions that we may have as well. So with that, I will open it up and turn it over to you, Joe.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council. Just want to make sure, can you all see and hear me clearly? Is that all good, just before I start off?
Yeah.
Awesome. So again, I appreciate everyone taking the time this evening. Also, just I'll be remiss, Joe DePinto, who's our operations manager at the Metropolitan Division, is also with me. He'll also be speaking on, a couple of incidents that occurred recently and just giving some clarity and explanation around those events.
Joe, thank you for joining us as well.
More importantly, just for the moment, speak about some of the... Absolutely. So, what I'd like to talk about, just, first I'd like to go over just some of the numbers, the processes that we have as it pertains to outage reporting, some storm incidents, as well as street light. So just for everyone listening, if you have a street light or anything that's out in your town, we ask that you call our customer service number. That's at 1-800-436-7734 to report those. We are required by the Board of Public Utility to address streetlight outages within 3 business days. That's in conditions permitting. And for the most part, good with holding on to that unless there's some other instance of underground failure or reasons that may prolong the repair. In addition to that, when also if there's any incidents or occurrences that you have around, outages or any type of events, we ask that you give a call in directly to PSE&G at that same number, the 436-7734. And the reason why that's important, most of the meters that we have out in the field aren't smart meters. And while we do have some technology to sense some of the outages, we don't know until we actually see those phone calls from the residents. That helps to populate and inform our distribution system to understand how dynamic the outage is and how best to deploy the resources. So I know we always kind of insist or ask that residents give a call to PSE&G. We understand you have your counselors in your town, the mayors, and people you can reach out to. But it's also equally important that you get that information to us so that we're best equipped with the information best to serve you all. So what I'll do from here, I know that there are some questions. We had a pretty busy, June and start to July. So I just want to open this up to Joe, and we just want to talk a little bit about some of the recent occurrences or incidents that we've had in Montclair. Just kind of explain the differences around this, the outages experienced, and what we're doing moving forward. Joe, are you there?
Yes, Joe, I am. All right. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having us. So it has been a busy July so far. There's no doubt. The first 2 weeks in July, with the heat in the first week, and then the storms this past week have been a challenge that has created certainly some outages across our service territory, not only locally in what we would call Metropolitan Division, where Montclair is a part of, but also for the whole state. The whole company has had its challenges. The outages in Montclair, basically, they break out into three categories. The first outage that I want to comment on happened back on June 6th. The second set of outages that I'd like to comment on happened on June 28th. And then there were just a couple of outages that were experienced within the township just this past last week, I should say, with the storms that rolled through. And actually, with the storms that rolled through, we had a lot of outages, but Montclair fared very well during last week's outages. So those would be the three categories that I'll attempt to address. And if at any point you have questions, just please chime in. I'm going to do the best I can, not to be too technical, to try and put it in general terms, but a lot of what I am challenged to try to communicate has to do with how our infrastructure is set up. And so without showing you a picture, it's going to be a little bit more challenging, but we'll see how it goes. The first outage back on June 6th was a result of it actually took place at our West Orange switching station. And just to give you some information in terms of how the system is set up, the Montclair substation is fed from supply lines that come from the West Orange switching station. These are circuits that we would call sub-transmission circuits. They don't feed houses, they don't feed businesses, they're just kind of like home runs going from one station to another to supply the source so that the Montclair substation can in turn feed the circuits that go out to your community and feed your businesses and residents. So on June 6th, about 6 o'clock, we had a violent failure to one of our 26 kV line breakers. That breaker failed so violently, it was rocked right off of its cement foundation. The steel I-beams that supported it were twisted. It damaged a breaker next to it. It shot oil and soot all over the 26 kV yard, which covered much of our equipment, open air equipment, and resulted in the shutdown of a major bus section within that station. And just as a note, it's important to understand that PSE&G designs its system on an N-1 planning criteria. And what that means is that we can always accept one outage. So for instance, if I have two lines or three lines feeding a particular source, I can lose one line and still be able to run effectively on the remaining two lines while I take the time to repair that failed line. Okay, so it's an N-1 contingency. And everywhere in our system, whether it's at West Orange switching station, whether it's at Montclair substation, or whether it's on the circuits that we're going to be talking about in a little bit, we have the ability to ride through a first failure. It's planned in, it's designed in. What happened at our West Orange switching station when this breaker failed, it not only failed the line, but it was so catastrophic that it took out the bus section, which took out approximately 5 lines out of that bus section. 4 of those lines fed Montclair substation. So the challenge that we had immediately was to assess the damage, get people there, right? Because we have alarms that come into our operating office where I am right now that tell us we have a problem at the station. We have to send people to the station. We have to assess the problem. And as you can imagine, with the catastrophic failure, there was a lot going on in Montclair that in West Orange that particular night. Within the first half hour, we were able to assess that the condition of the subtransmission system, which means, what are the circuits that are impacted and what substations do they feed? So out of this particular bus group, it feeds Montclair substation, it feeds South Orange Valley substation, and it feeds South Orange substation, 3 different substations. But unfortunately, 4 of the lines impacted fed Montclair. So within a half hour, we were able to assess the remaining line that was into Montclair substation, and we realized that that line was 150% loaded, meaning I can only go 125% over the capacity of a line for 24 hours before that line will fail. That's how much room I have in a worst case scenario. Montclair substation was being held. It's usually fed by 5 lines. It was being held up by 1 subtransmission line, which was 150% overloaded. So with that said, one of the other things that we have is a natural tension between wanting to keep customers in power or restoring customers versus failing an asset. So in this case, with the remaining line into Montclair sub, while all of the customers were still in power, we deliberately shed load in order to preserve the asset, in order to save that 1 remaining line going into Montclair sub so that we wouldn't fail it because it was overloaded. And by shedding load, that means that we had somebody go to Montclair sub and literally cut out 5 circuits. Those 5 circuits resulted in 5,086 customers being impacted when we did that. What that did was it brought the loading of that 1 line down below its emergency rating, and it allowed us to continue to work our plan within West Orange substation, so switching station, so that we could effectively get the other lines back in service to restore the balance of the customers. And we were able to do that effectively. And on the first outage, those 5,086 customers were impacted for 1 hour, approximately 2 hours. So by
Joe, really
yeah.
quick, can you explain what happens if we would have lost that 5th line? Can you just really quick just explain what
Sure.
happens if we lost the final line?
Sure. So if we would have lost the final line, the outage would have taken tens of hours to restore, because we would, to have to go back on the 1 line that we did go back on with, and I'll explain that in a minute, instead of going back on 2 lines because we preserved the remaining line and we had another line that we were immediately able to go back with, and that got us out of the hole that we were in, and we're able to restore customers. If we had failed that line, we would have had 0 lines going into the station, with the best case scenario coming back with 1 line, which still would have put us in a very compromising position. So So again, you have to appreciate, if you can, the tension that we have between understanding that we're, now going to turn customers off and have that tension between preserving an asset. So we, within a 2-hour period of time, were able to assess our damage. We were able to do some internal switching, clear some of the hazards away to get a second circuit back into Montclair. And then a couple hours later, we were able to get a third line into Montclair and stabilize the grid, and everything was just great. And we were off on our way to making those immediate repairs and planning for some long-term repairs, because we had some damaged breakers there as well. What happened the next day on June 7th, with the failure of the breaker that had the catastrophic damage, again, if I may, the breakers are protected by a relay system. The relays are the brains. The relays are the things that sense when things aren't right and communicate direction to the mechanical aspects of the stations and gives them directions on whether to open or close or do something. The control cable for the breaker that failed was melted. It was grounded. It was faulted in place. So when that damage happened, we did remove that breaker, but that control wire was still intact. However, it was damaged. Coming into Monday, the next day, we had a failure on another 26 line, totally not related to Montclair, but was on an adjacent bus group in that same West Orange switching station. And what happens with electricity is when it has a fault, it's always looking for ground. When this one circuit failed, the fault current back into the station was able to make its way to the control wiring on that failed breaker. The relay sensed that fault current on that control wire, and it said, hey, this breaker's failing again. Let's take out the bus group. And that's what caused the second outage on June 7th. And again, we were in the same exact scenario I just explained on June 6th, on June 7th, where we had all of the lines to Montclair with the exception of one out of power again, the subtransmission lines. And so on June 7th, we again had to load shed to protect the line, only we were able to clearly understand what happened and turn that outage around. So the same 5,086 customers were out for 28 minutes. That was a very challenging, unexpected, non-normal type of situation. But nonetheless, that's what caused the outages for 5 Montclair circuits on June 6th and on June 7th. And I'll just stop there if there's any questions on that. Okay, hearing none.
Joe, I have a quick one for you just to help, to move it along. Do we forecast or plan for these types of loads or things like that? What type of, planning does the utility do to kind of forecast what demands will be?
Yes, every year we're planning based on system loads. For instance, this past week, we had very heavy loads on our system. We reached, even on our transmission system, we reached an all-time peak, if you will. We take those loads and we look at every circuit, we look at every single station transformer, and we plan to make sure that we address any overloads that are known and put plans into place that would allow us to continue to reinforce our infrastructure so that we could ride through heavy load periods. You gotta keep in mind our whole planning criteria is based on the hottest day of the year. So if we're in the 80s or the 70s, that N-1 contingency, we have a lot of room to play in that. But when you're in 100-degree weathers for multiple days, that's when the N-1 contingency is at its best and is maximized, if that makes any sense. So,
Joe, I have an additional question. This is Brian Scantlebury.
Hi, Brian.
Because of the events of June 6th and 7th, what steps has PSE&G taken to attempt to ensure that type of event doesn't happen again?
Yeah, so great question. So what had happened with this breaker that failed, we took it apart. It was already destroyed, but we took it apart to try and understand what caused the failure. You know, and listen, mechanically things happen, right? There was nothing that we were able to see in advance for this particular breaker, but we did have a sister breaker, one that was of the same vintage as the one that failed in that station too. And we were very curious to see if that would show any signs that would give us a hint. And we decommissioned that breaker willfully and took it apart in order to try to learn why this other one failed so violently. So what we did was not only have a new breaker for the one that failed, but we replaced the sister breaker as well. And those are the only two of its kind in West Orange Switch, so they no longer exist. So that was a good proactive approach to get those two breakers out of service, replace them with new ones. And then within the failure of the one breaker, it damaged an adjacent breaker to it. So we were able to replace three. So in short, you know, this bus section has three brand new breakers, and that whole bus section now has all brand new gas circuit breakers, which are a much better reliable breaker than the old oil circuit breaker that was there prior to. The other thing, Brian, we were able to do, because of these switching stations are so intricate and the way they're set up, outages for these circuits to do disconnect maintenance, to clean insulators, become very difficult at times. Two things really work to our favor here, and I'm actually going to call it providential, because what had happened was when these failures occurred, if you remember, the temperature on June 6th and June 7th was beautiful. We were in the 60-degree temperatures. We were able, remember, the lower the temperature, the more flexibility we have on N-1 contingency, where we weren't in high load periods like we were last week. Because the temperatures were so cool in June, we were able to take aggressive outages in order to fast track the cleaning and the disconnect maintenance of the infrastructure that was impacted by the explosion. The other thing that happened, because the oil and the soot was all over everything, which made everything very conductive within the station. I don't know if you remember or not, but I certainly do. We had a heavy forecast for heavy rains on Monday, June 7th. And we were very fearful that the rains would create more outages because we had so much contamination on our bus. What had happened providentially is the rain almost virtually cleaned the infrastructure for us. I've never seen that before, but in the context of what we were dealing with, that was a blessing that came down. So we had two things working to our advantage. We had cool weather and we had a torrential rain that helped us restore that station much more quickly than if we were in a high heat period. So I just share that because I realize the value of that. Whether you realize the value of that or not, you as residents of Montclair, if there was any best case scenario that you could have had for a catastrophic failure that night, that was it. So, yes.
I have a question. Well, first of all, thank you, Mr. DePinto, for that very thorough explanation. I had a question for Mr. McQueen. If you could just tell us one more time, because you cut off a little bit about street light outages. That's one thing that for me as a council person, for my constituents, we're plagued with outages, and it's been the process where folks are residents are asked to go and take note of the street pole. So they see that the lights are out at night, then they have to go back out during the day, get the street pole number, and then put it into the computer, the pole number. But you said they can also call it in. Is that, and you
Yes.
have, what, could you just explain the process one more time?
Yes, no, absolutely. So for street light outages, just to kind of give another basic understanding of it, we don't know that those lights are out. So we really rely on the residents, towns to kind of identify these, let us know so that we can report these and get folks out there. There are several ways you can report them. You can either give a call into PSE&G at our customer service number 24/7. That's the 1-800-436-7734. And you can report if you don't have the poll number, because we understand sometimes those things, the tags are old, maybe they fall. If you give your approximate address of where that pole is located, we can find it that way. If there's any distinguishing marks, the poles in front of 164 near the bank or something like that. But the more information, the better. That helps us to get a repair in there. And then you can also go online. So on our online website, some folks, it may be difficult to access that. So that's why we always have the call-in option. But you can actually log into my account. Anyone can do that. You can report street light outages for other streets that you don't live on if you're driving down. So really anyone can report an outage. We really encourage that. And usually in those cases, if it's something as simple as a bulb out or a photo cell, we can typically take care of that, within the 3-day period. However, if it's something a little bit more involved where we have a cable failure or something underground where we got to do excavation or repair conduit, those repairs could take a little bit longer. Depending on what's happening with the workload. So either way, we ask that you first get those things in. And if there are, if you did report them and there are delays in that, you can always give a call back to customer service. You can escalate it, ask to speak to a supervisor, and they can get some of that more specific data, with respect to what status it's in, if it's with engineering or what have you. And, also with the town, your mayor, your councilors can always reach out to me, your business administrator, and I'll do my best to try to assist.
Terrific. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
For a second, Councilwoman Price Abrams, do you have a question?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't know, Mr. DePindo, if you were going to then maybe elaborate on the others, and I don't know if you were going to go into the same level of detail. I kind of have a more overview question as well, and I could wait till you're done explaining if you like, or I just wanted to ask a question with regard to the place in town. I'm the 3rd Ward council member. It's part of the southern part of the town. And I didn't know from the first 2 outages, but learned by the 3rd one that there was a growing frustration with some of the same people who were unfortunately hit. And I have a feeling they were very different reasons you were probably going to explain. And I think a confluence of things, breeded a lot of frustration among some constituents. So I did not know initially that you were going to be presenting tonight. I thank you both for coming and for the information. Even just the fact that you're showing up is, I think, helpful for folks who are listening. But I did indicate that I would do some follow-up with Mr. McQueen and certainly have you for some of that explanation as well. So if you could, maybe if you're going to explain the rest, maybe indicate what part of town these were and what we could be doing to reinforce going forward. Thank you.
Yes. So unfortunately, I'm not really sure. I could get the prints and kind of, I have some emails here. Perhaps that might help. But let me just begin to explain the June 28th outages. The June 6th and the June 7th outages of the 5 circuits, Montclair 6 and Montclair 12 were impacted with the West Orange circuit. And on June 28th, Montclair 6 and Montclair 12 were impacted again. And those were the more longer outages. These were the outages that lasted 6 hours and the other one up to 12, maybe even 14, almost 16 hours. Okay, so I do have one address from a Rahun Williams, who I think sent an email to Joe McQueen, who's on South Fullerton. If that helps, that's Montclair 12. I believe, and again, I could look at the prints to give you specific streets if you'd like. Robin, Lori.
Yeah, I don't mean for you to have to go through that at this time,
Okay.
but I would be happy to follow up with you, and maybe we could just talk about how that, our part of town is, being reinforced if need be, or, I understand some of these were just their own unique occurrences, but, obviously folks feel a certain level of frustration, so we want to make sure we do some follow-up on that.
Absolutely.
Happy to I'll pick it up through John McQueen and look forward to having a conversation.
Very good.
Thank you.
So on June 28th, this is the first heat wave that we really started getting into. This was probably into our third, 90+ degree day, if you recall. What had happened here was these two circuits, Montclair 6 and Montclair 12, both had failures 2 hours apart from one another. And again, to reinforce, we have that N-1 contingency for each area of our infrastructure. So while the West Orange switching station outage had to do with the sub-transmission lines, these outages here on June 28th had to do with the specific circuits that leave Montclair sub and feed your town. And when a circuit fails, we have what we call spare equipment inside the substation that can be used in a contingency. And we have a spare circuit outside the substation that can be used as a contingency. Now, these two circuits are very challenging circuits in that they have underground and it goes to overhead and then it goes back into the backyards and it spreads all over the place and it has a series of overhead, underground type of infrastructure. Why am I explaining that? Because every piece of that circuit that goes from the underground to the overhead, back to the underground to the overhead, they all have separate, what we would call breakdown locations. So for instance, Montclair 4006, 870 customers experienced an outage at about 4 o'clock on the 28th. In order for us to get those customers restored on the spare circuit that we have in the field, because that spare circuit is just sitting there with no load on it. It's just sitting there saying, use me whenever you have to use me. But we can only put so much load on that particular circuit. Again, worst case scenario, in the heat of the day, N-1, I could handle all the load from my highest loaded circuit on that spare circuit. Not a problem. But I can't handle 2 circuits on that spare circuit. Just one. Okay? So that's one thing to keep in mind. When this Montclair 4006 failed, because we have all of the up and down with the infrastructure and then running through the backyards, we actually have to go to, on this particular circuit, 12 different field locations. Some of those locations are in the manholes in the streets. Most of those locations are in the backyards. And we have to, either if it's in the manholes, we got to pump the water out, we got to go down there, we got to perform switching. This takes, obviously manpower to do that, personnel to do that. And then in the overhead locations, we have, because most of them are in the backyards, we can't use our aerial lifts. We have to mostly climb them. So just in general, the restoration to these types of circuits take a long time. So what happened on Montclair 6 is we had an underground cable failure, and we were in the process of cutting it over like we would normally do. Montclair has 2 circuits like this, and we have other circuits like this that feed the town of West Orange, South Orange, East Orange. We don't have a lot of these type of circuits, but unfortunately, these 2 circuits, when they came out, they happened to be the same 2 circuits that were associated with the previous outage in the beginning of the month. So there's where insult adds to injury, where injury adds to insult. So we had 870 customers out of power for approximately 6.5 hours. That's how much time it took us just to go to all of those locations and switch customers over to the spare circuit. And then it took us approximately 9 hours to make that repair. So at 4 o'clock, Montclair 6 fails. And then unfortunately, at 6 o'clock, Montclair 4012 fails. So now this is the problem that we have. We have 2 circuits out of Montclair, both with underground failures, which it takes at least a minimum of 8 hours to fix an underground failure. But we only have one contingency to go to, and that's our spare circuit. So again, we have to make a deliberate choice between restoring customers and saving the asset. So when we converted all of the customers over to the spare circuit from Montclair 6, when Montclair 12 failed, we had to keep putting customers from Montclair 12 over to the spare circuit and then take readings real time in order to take the current on that circuit right up to its limit. And we were only able to restore approximately 129 customers before we could say, no more, we can't do it. Again, because if we put any more load on that, any more customers on that, we would be at risk of failing that spare circuit, and that all customers on 12 and 6 would have been out of power for a very, very long time. So Montclair 12 customers experienced, 129 of them experienced an outage of about 6.5 hours, about 6 hours. And then 1,200 of the customers experienced the longest outage of 16 hours. And it took us approximately 14 hours to make the repairs on Montclair 12. So I don't know how clear that is to you. I'm trying to do the best I can to keep it high level and simple, but those were the scenarios that happened on June 28th that definitely created frustration because it was very hot, very uncomfortable, and very long outages, to which we had just regular cable failures that failed. There was no rhyme or reason to it. It was just the stress of the loading failed the circuit, and we were able to repair it. So any questions on that outage that day? Okay, and then lastly, just from this past week, we had, the storms that came through on Tuesday of last week. We had approximately 22,000 customers that were impacted with long-term outages on Tuesday into Wednesday. Just to give you a little bit of information in terms of what we were dealing with, we had 181 individual services be ripped from people's homes that we had to go to individual homes to restore services. We had approximately 25 broken poles that we had to address. And we had about 150 tree locations that we couldn't perform our work until we had our tree contractor go down there to remove large trees that fell over, about 150 locations. So that was for a quick half-hour storm. It took us approximately 24 hours to restore the 22,000 customers on July 7th, and July 8th. So out of that, there were 2 outages that were experienced in Montclair. One was reported by, I have the email. I don't know if there's a counselor who lives on Fairview Place that was out for 10 hours and 19 minutes. That was an area, or what we would call a fuse outage, that was created by a tree. That was just one of the many areas. Oh, and if I may, we had 115 areas that, so the services, 181 services, they were just single customers that were out because of the services were ripped down from the house. The areas that we had to respond to were 115, and those are larger areas that impact anywhere from, a handful of customers up to hundreds of customers. And then we also had on top of that 16 circuit lockouts where the entire circuits were locked out. So there was a tremendous amount of damage. But Montclair only saw two outages during this weather event. Again, one on Fairview Place, which was a tree that brought the primary down, and then there was one on Park Street, which was a Montclair 4004 circuit that impacted 82 customers on 2 separate occasions there. So those are the outages that happened. I understand the frustration. I myself was out of power this last week, having to guide and counsel my son on how to get my generator started from work, to keep our refrigeration going and our furnace and our well. So I certainly understand the frustration. And I just want you to understand and know that we work very hard to do the best we can to, respond as quickly as possible to restore service. We can't guarantee uninterrupted service, but we do the best we can to minimize the frustration. So I don't know if you have any other questions for me. I'd be glad to take any questions you may have.
Yes, Mr. DePinto, Bill Herlock, Deputy Mayor, thank you for your presentation. I greatly appreciate the level of detail. I was actually the one on Fairview with my neighbors who were out, and I do appreciate you all getting to that as quick as possible and addressing it. And also want to thank Mr. McQueen, who I've been working with for years, been very responsive as well. And it's good. I'm sure we're going to have a lot more of these, unfortunately, this summer, the rate we're going, every time I look at the weather app. But thank you. I appreciate your time and your patience.
You're welcome.
I'll just say thank you as well. And I just have a thought, which is, with the prevalence of QR codes because of the pandemic, in terms of, pulling menus up at restaurants and things like that, I wonder if there's a thought or a plan at PSE&G to affix QR codes to lampposts, just as something that, if it's out, then somebody can raise their phone and scan it and then takes them to the portal to report an outage. Just something to think about, or run up the flagpole if you haven't already thought of it or deployed something like that.
It's a very interesting, creative idea. We're always looking for ways to improve and make reporting outages easy. But what a use of technology that would be. I'll certainly raise that up. Thank you.
Thanks.
And if I may, just kind of, not sure if anyone has any additional questions, but just another point, I will definitely be having some follow-up conversations, with the township, just on some opportunities to see where we can enhance reliability. We understand that, the work isn't done. It's like a farmer. We have to continue to look for areas and ways to improve. We do have some ideas that are out there. So we will be meeting with the town in the future to discuss some ideas. And we hopefully, we hope that things, we have the right cooperation, which it seems like we do have, and we just kind of work the plan. But definitely want to thank you all for your understanding and your patience. And we know, being without power is not anything that and nowadays that folks can go without. So we understand the frustration. We're here to work with everyone, and ultimately we won't quit until everyone's back within power. So you have that commitment from us that we won't leave anyone. We're not forgetting anyone on this, and we're here for you.
Joe, Mr. Mayor, can I tell Joe something or ask something?
Sure. Go ahead.
I've been in and out. My wife's birthday, you guys from PSE&G don't know, but 62 today. For the last week, I've been dealing with it. I'm on here because I wanted to hear you and deal with some other issues, but I should be at my wife's party. I just wanted to thank you for what happened in Christmas Eve. As you know, it was Christmas Day or Christmas Eve that Michelle Gonzalez and particularly Karen Fryer D'Souza, I think they're your staff people, right? When you weren't able to help, Joe, you got them on. They got on. They got Mr. Barry, who has relatives in the First Ward. Councilman Herlock, Deputy Mayor Herlock knows what I'm talking about. The man was so desperate for help for his 85-year-old relatives. And your folks, Karen especially, was on the phone with me, got them their power back within an hour or two. But it was a Christmas Day thing where almost nobody could help anyone. But there was a really bad storm. I think we had a storm. And I wanted to just compliment you. I want you to do whatever you can to help our local ward council people who always get these complaints. I'm at large, so I don't get them. But this gentleman was the councilman and almost the mayor of Bloomfield for many, many years, Joe Barry. And he wanted me to thank you again for what you did and what PSE&G did to restore the power to the relatives on Bellevue Avenue in the First Ward of Montclair. So thank you again for that. And just, that's the kind of work, that's the kind of response I appreciate, we all appreciate. And I've been doing this 21 years, so thank you again.
Thank you, and I'll share that with Karen and Michelle as well. Thank you for the kind words.
Yeah, thank you for that as well. Having been here on Christmas Day, doing what we did last week, restoring customers, that is very meaningful what you just shared. So thank you.
All right. Well, with that, gentlemen, I want to thank both of you for your time. I think overarching, and I'm sure it makes your life easier as well. Something we hear from, of course, residents, and certainly we see it in other aspects, and certainly in conversations with other towns, cities. Switch over to technology, which I know is an infrastructure, task really, but outages that report, for example, the technology there so that outages on streetlights tell you when they're out, as opposed to people having to go out and figure that out. Obviously the equipment notifying you when it is at fault. Of course, that's a major investment, we know, and we know you've got to go repair boards and everything else to get what you need. But certainly, as part of that conversation, just going and looking on the horizon as to what the technology needs are to make sure that these processes kind of catch up to the technology that's there, I think would be one of the big asks. And certainly, we're willing to work within any way that we can to be partners in that, to alleviate the kind of more antiquated systems that frustrate residents and, quite frankly, probably slow you guys down, right? So whatever we can do to help in that regard, happy to as well. But again, thank you both for all your work. Really appreciate you taking the time to really go deep into what the issues were. For anyone who's listened here, I think they have a pretty good understanding of exactly what went on, what you guys did to address it, what the challenges were, and the time you had to put in to get it to be remedied. So thank you both again. We appreciate it, and certainly we'll have you back on as needed. And I hope everyone definitely took away also that it's very important to contact you, Joe. You started with this. You got to contact you to make sure you guys have the information as well. Certainly, I know they're going to keep reaching out to us, of course, but it's important the information gets to you so you guys can take action and plot out some of the challenges and problems. So thank you both again, gentlemen, and we'll have you guys back whenever needed. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Okay. Big thank you to PSE&G for both gentlemen there for jumping on with us. We appreciate that. Next, we are going to move to proclamations. So the first proclamation, Councilwoman Price Abrams, would you mind reading that one?
Oh, be on my honor. Thank you, Mayor. I want to just mention going into this that Councilman Russo and I attended an event at the Dr. King Memorial on June 13th. And it was an opportunity to really see this in action. And as someone who has done community relations myself in my career, it really was a wonderful opportunity to bring people together. So pleased to offer up these words here. So we recognize the second Sunday in June as Racial Amity Day in Montclair. Whereas the Township of Montclair supports the motto on the Great Seal of the United States, which bears the inscription E pluribus unum, a phrase that translates from Latin as out of many, one. And whereas the greatest asset of Montclair is its people, and whereas Montclair is comprised of multicultural, multi-ethnic, and multiracial citizens, and whereas friendship, collegiality, civility, respect, and kindness are commonly shared ideals of the people of Montclair, and whereas the Towards E Pluribus Unum initiative has invited communities across the United States of America to join in introspection and reflection on the beauty and richness of the diverse people of the great nation, while reaching out with a spirit of amity towards one another annually on the second Sunday in June. It is the ultimate goal of the initiative to establish a national Race Amity Day, and Montclair joins them in their mission to achieve this recognition of racial amity at the national level. And whereas Montclair's Baha'i faith community led the observation of this year's Racial Amity Day through a devotional gathering at the Dr. Martin Luther King Memorial at Nishwayne Park on Sunday, June 13th. The organization took the opportunity to pray for unity and celebrate the ways in which people have reached across racial differences to help each other through association, amity, and collaboration. Through their ongoing work, the Montclair Baha'i faith community continues to build working partnerships, friendships, and alliances to advance the cause of race relations and racial amity. Now, therefore, the Mayor and Council of the Township of Montclair do hereby recognize the second Sunday in June as Racial Amity Day in Montclair and encourage the people of Montclair to observe the day with ceremonies and activities that celebrate our ability to overcome racial prejudice through collaboration, amity, and love. And I did actually want to mention some of the organizers really briefly. Ali Hartsfield, Julia Berger, and Behzad Mohadded were the three primary people who put it together. And I don't know, Councilman Russo, if you have anything else to add, I appreciated that we were there together.
Just want to add that Ali Hartsfield, who's been the advocate here, the leader for years, worked together at Consumer Affairs. She was the Director of Public Information while I was the Lemon Law Director for 15 years. We worked together for many years in the state office in Newark, and she told me all about this great effort of the Baha'i community in Montclair. And I said, well, gee, wow, we live together. We live in the same town. This is something that brings us together. And it's really important that we promote this idea of race amity while we struggle with all the different conflicting ideas that people are presenting, especially while we're dealing with a lot of people who lie and distort and try to make us fight each other. So please, everybody participate in this. And Ali, I'm just giving you a shout out to thank you for all these years of your enlightened leadership with the race amity effort. Thank you, Councilor Price Abrams, for the resolution. It's basically the same proclamation we did a couple of years ago with my colleagues, Bill Herlock and Robin Schlager and Mayor Sean Spiller. We did this a couple of years ago, but we've updated it now with the new council. Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
All right, so moved. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Excellent. And thank you so much, Councilwoman. I appreciate reading that. And certainly, as the councilman noted, we've been longtime supporters and appreciate and important to keep recognizing that. So thank you to everyone. Next, we have a proclamation condemning anti-Semitism. Councilwoman Schlager, would you care to read that one?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Whereas the people of Montclair share the vision of a better world for all humankind, built upon the ideals of love and respect for one another, and are committed to ensuring the safety, sanctity, and integrity of life in our community. And whereas anti-Semitism in all its forms is an anathema to our beliefs and the values of our town. One of the greatest strengths of Montclair is our diversity and our commitment to creating an inclusive township that celebrates values and affirms our rich diversity. When acts of hatred, bigotry, or bias occur, we understand that it is an affront to everything we stand for. And whereas in the month of May 2021, there was a terrible and sudden increase in anti-Semitic violence in America, Jews and Jewish institutions in New York, Los Angeles, and elsewhere in our country have suffered from violence, vandalism, and hate. The Wall Street Journal recently reported that the FBI and NYPD have opened investigations into more than 24 new anti-Semitic hate crimes in New York alone. We know that in 2019, the FBI Uniform Crime Report documented that over 60% of anti-religious hate crimes in America were committed against Jews. And whereas the U.S. State Department defines anti-Semitism as any words or actions which blame Jews as a people or groups for being generally responsible for real or perceived ills in society or our world, noting that it often employs sinister stereotypes and negative character traits. And whereas our nation and Montclair are built upon its immigrant communities, our history highlighted by the immigrant experience, so well reflected in our diversity today. We will always embrace people of all races, religions, nationalities, sexual orientations, socioeconomic backgrounds, and political viewpoints who strengthen our social and cultural fabric and reinforce our foundation of freedom. And whereas we, the governing body of the Township of Montclair, hereby condemn anti-Semitism in all forms, without exception, and call for all local, state, and federal authorities to investigate and prosecute all criminal instances of anti-Semitism wherever they occur, and encourage our leaders, educators, community organizations, houses of worship, and all citizens to work to understand and oppose anti-Semitism and remain forever committed to being a peaceful and vibrant community where all forms of diversity are embraced as a strength. Now, therefore, the mayor and the council of the Township of Montclair encourage the community to come together to support and affirm those impacted by oppression, and we continue to confront the realities of everyday injustice that affect members of the Jewish community and any other marginal groups. And I so move.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Well, thank you, Councilwoman Schlager. I know that as a township, we've put out statements to that regard. We've got the resolution proclamation here. We've got statements that we've made, and I think it's important that we continue to make them as necessary, around this or any form of hate, bigotry, discrimination, which I know that all of us have been committed to and continue to do. So thank you on that one. But thank you for reading that. Appreciate that, Councilwoman.
Of course.
Okay, those were our proclamations for tonight that we've got. So with that, I'm going to open up public comment in an effort to minimize exposure to COVID-19 and to maintain social distancing practices. This July 13, 2021 council meeting and further meetings until the pandemic is over will only be available to the public remotely. Those who wish to participate now during public comment should dial into 408-418-9388. When asked to enter access code, please enter 173-254-3665 and press pound. When asked to enter an attendee number, please press pound. When asked to state your name, please do so and press pound. The administrator will say when it's the caller's turn to speak, and the caller will then hear 2 beeps. At that time, the caller will have an opportunity to make his or her comment. Mr. Stafford, I'm going to turn it over to you, and Mr. Fan. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. First up would be caller with the number starting 908-693. Please, it is your turn to talk. 908-693. Please do us the service of turning off your listening device, stating your name for the record, and keep your comments under 3 minutes.
Hello, this is Brian Garnham. I want to talk about 2 fees that are imposed by the town of Montclair. I just got my water bill today, and we have the new infrastructure charge on there for $25. Previously, that charge did not exist, but there was a minimum charge of $34 up to 1,000 cubic feet of water. I am someone who does not use much water. My current bill, I've only used 2 cubic feet of water. The previous bill, the minimum charge would cover, obviously, water usage, administrative costs, infrastructure costs, etc. Now we have broken out the infrastructure charge and are being charged $25 a month. And I feel it's unreasonable to continue charging a minimum charge for water usage when you've broken out that infrastructure charge. The water usage should be, the minimum charge for water usage should either be eliminated or reduced to reflect the fact that you've broken out the infrastructure charge. Secondly, I wanted to talk about the false alarm reduction program, where residents with alarm systems have to pay a $50 yearly fee. First of all, I think the name is a little off. I don't think it reduces false alarms. I think it just provides income. But the township has authorized a late fee of $25 if you're late on your payment for the $50 annual fee. That's a 50% late fee, and I think that's excessive, and I think that should be looked at. That doesn't seem fair that you have to pay a 50% late fee. Thank you.
Thank you. Caller with the number starting 973-979. It is your turn to comment. 973-979. Please do us the service of turning off your listening device, state your name for the record, and keep your comments under 3 minutes.
Good evening. This is Rafael Marzullo. I am co-chair of the Montclair Aquilonia Sister Cities, president of the St. Vito Society. In front of you this evening is a resolution to put the name of Aquilonia Way on the corner of Pine and Grand Street, where the San Vito Society is located. We became first of all, I would like to, for the first time in speaking to you all, I would like to congratulate the new Township Council, Mayor Spiller, Deputy Mayor Herlock, and the rest of the council. Welcome. We have been a sister city since 2017. We began this so that we could bring attention to Our Lady of Montclair Church and keeping it open in our community in the 100-year anniversary of the San Vito Society. Our sister city since then has formed the Community Outreach Program for Our Lady of Mount Carmel. And since then, we have worked closely with the Township Council, with the Fire Chief, John Herman, and Police Chief Todd Conforti. Since we began the sister cities, we exchanged visiting each other's, visiting Aquilonia, Italy, and then coming to Montclair. I just wanted to show what has come out of the sister cities in the community outreach program. To the generous donations every Thanksgiving, we have delivered over 100 turkeys to Tony's Kitchen and Desserts to the Salvation Army for over 400 people. Together with Montclair Police, PBA Local 53, we donate truckloads of toys to the Salvation Army for families in need. Organized and implemented by volunteers, local institutions, and municipal employees. The Community Outreach Program for Our Lady of Montclair Church also donated over $1,000 to the Northeast Coalition for the Community Gardens of Montclair, that we proudly support the mini pantry program every week around town with food donation. During the pandemic, the Community Outreach Program with the sister cities, with the San Vito Society, with the members of Our Lady of Mount Carmel Church, has donated every single day to our first responders. We supplied every day to Mount Sinai Hospital and bringing food products because of them working so hard. We were able to deliver stuff to them so they didn't have to go out. And we further, at the end, we gave nearly 300 tote bags from the accounting firm of KPMG that we filled up with snacks, nuts, mugs, drinks, toiletries for all the workers at Mount Sinai Hospital. Former Mayor Jackson was there. Mayor Spiller, you were there. Deputy Mayor William Herlock joined us, and a lot more people. The Montclair Police Department came out in droves and helped us transport everything. Jalopy of Montclair donated ice cream to the hospital employees. Basically, what we're trying to say is the brotherhood that we have shown through our sister cities and in developing all these groups. Oh, one more thing. I'm sorry. I apologize. A special thank you to David Cunningham and Mayor Spiller that on the weekend of Good Friday and for Passover, that the Dr. Cummings and Chief Herman and a lot of the Montclair Fire Department were there. We donated almost 400 bags of groceries to our senior citizens in the Fourth Ward and around, and there was so much left over that we decided to also donate to the people that had lost their jobs from COVID and needed help.
Mr. Marzullo, I beg your pardon. That sound was your time being up. Please do us the service of concluding your comments. Thank you, sir.
Okay. I strongly support that we pass this evening's to put Aquilonia Way as a tribute to our sister cities and our church and San Vito for the work that we do in the Township of Montclair. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor? Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead, Councilman Russo.
Yeah, I just want to say something. Thank you, Rafael. I got a nice message, I guess we all got today from our friend Jose German, who heads the Northeast Earth Coalition. He was very, very nice in praising and supporting this idea of changing the name and listing a new name for our sister city. So I wanted to publicly thank him as a partner in our community. He lives in the general area, but Jose, thank you for supporting this. It's been something I've been trying to get done for the Aquilonia Sister City Group, too, working with our council colleagues. But I want people to understand, I'm the only real visible name there that sounds Italian, Russo, right? But I also have relatives in Puerto Rico, which is where Jose and his family connection is. And I wanted to thank him again because unity among all different groups, ethnic, racial, religious groups, is important at this time. So Jose, with your Puerto Rican connection, my Italian and Puerto Rican connection, thank you again for supporting our sister city, Aquilonia, with the great traditions of the Italian community in Montclair and the Mount Carmel Church. Thank you, Mayor.
Next up would be the caller with the number starting 973-820. 973-820. It is your turn to comment. Please do us the service of turning off your listening device, state your name for the record, and keep your comments under 3 minutes.
Good evening, Council. This is Tony Martin. I would first like to make a citizen motion. Have you ever heard of that? That Italian Puerto Rican Councilman Russo be allowed to leave early and attend his wife's birthday party. I can't believe you're still here, Bob. Christine deserves you at home.
Thank you. I'm staying for now.
Okay. Secondly, I note that the council has set up a new hotline where citizens can call if they have problems, if they spot a problem in town. I so wish that we could have something like this for housing. We, in my building, which is a large apartment building on North Fullerton, currently are experiencing big difficulties because we have had no elevator service to half the building for 4.5 months, and now the other half has gone down. And if this is a private building, I'm not saying that government should necessarily have anything to do with it, but I can tell you that there are health and safety issues involved here. There are a lot of residents on high floors who simply cannot climb up 5 or 4 flights of stairs every day. And I'm asking that the council contemplate how we might be helped in that. Secondly, if I may ask the town attorney to tell us how the court case involving the rent control ordinance, which would also establish more housing regulation, and that is why I think it will benefit all apartment dwellers in Montclair. I would ask you, Attorney Karasik, how we stand there. What's the next thing to happen? And thank you so much, all of you.
Mayor, should I answer?
Yeah, yes, please. Thank you.
Ms. Martin, how are you? As right now, as I think you're aware, the township filed its final papers with the appellate division on July 1st. And we're now waiting for the appellate court to make a decision. I believe they intend to schedule oral argument. And I'll let you know when there's a hearing date, assuming that they do that. They don't have to. But we do anticipate, since the appeal's been accelerated, that we will get some decision relatively soon, which could be this month or next month. I can't, there's no accounting for the court schedule, and we have no control over it. So we're hopeful that will prevail, but there's no further news on that score. Did you have anything else on? You know,
think
we
that
are aware of the problems in your building. You have called us. The township, again, we sympathize with tenants, but a lot of landlord-tenant issues are state law issues dealt with in the courts, and the township has very little control and ability to interfere. And in terms of health and safety, the manager can speak, but we do our best to make sure that there are no health and safety violations of our codes. But beyond that, we have a lot. There isn't much we can do, and I definitely feel for you, but that's the best I can say.
Thank you. Next up would be caller with the number starting 973-979. It is your turn to speak. 973-979. Please, for the record, state your name, keep your comments under 3 minutes, and do us the service of turning off your listening device.
Hello, Council.
We can hear you, sir.
Tirana. Okay, awesome. My name is Antonio Tirana. I'm an avid skateboarder and the president of the Montclair High School Skateboard Club. So first off, I would like to give a big thank you to Mayor Spiller, Councilors Schlager, Dr. Bellis, and Russo for their continued support of the skate park, as well as my colleagues on the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, Marcia Almeida and Jose Germain. They've been there supporting me since the beginning of this movement, and honestly, I feel like we couldn't have done it without them in the beginning. So, the Rain Skate Park has been more than a hit this year, as we all have known. It has brought many people to Montclair and Montclair's businesses, while also keeping many Montclairians, Montclair youth active and engaged outside and actively. The skate park has shown me and many others the positive effects that come with having a skate park in town. So I'm calling to implore the Township Council to vote unanimously in support of the resolution to establish a permanent skate park in Montclair. The temporary skate park has grown the skate community in Montclair tremendously, with new skateboarders popping up left and right. Skateboarding is becoming very popular, much more popular than it ever has been before. And as we've seen, many of the surrounding towns have professionally built concrete skate parks, you know, whether it was before or, you know, during the time skateboarding has been announced in the Olympics. So, you know, with those towns having these beautiful skate parks, it kind of makes Montclair look like they don't care for their skateboarders. And obviously, while we know this is false, it definitely is time for Montclair to take the next big step and show that this is not true. And the one way you guys can do that is by creating this beautiful skate park that is enjoyable for families and visitors of our town to see. So on behalf of myself and the skateboarding community here in Montclair, we ask that you please support this resolution so our long-awaited park can be built. Thank you.
Thank you. Caller with the number starting 646-713. It is your turn to comment. 646-713. Please do us the service of turning off your listening device, state your name for the record, and do your best to keep your comments under 3 minutes. Caller 646-713.
Hear me?
We can hear
Can you
you,
hear me?
yes. Yes.
Sorry about that, sir. My name is Mark Joseph. I'm a resident of the 4th Ward, also a member of Montclair Beyond Policing. And I know I usually call and talk about defunding the police, but today I was actually just going to call and talk a little bit about abolition. We're actually starting an abolition study group. That's kind of the content of my call tonight, just to kind of open it up to anybody who wants to come to learn more about abolition. Because I think when people hear defunding the police, they think of something that's really negative, and really abolition is all about presence, not absence, and about creating life-affirming institutions. So if you want to check us out on Facebook, Montclair Beyond Policing, anybody can come. Council members, you can come. Anybody can come and learn more about it. Just want to put that into people's radar. It's also bit.ly/ abolition study group, but it's open to all. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. Bye.
Thank you. Caller with the number starting 973-747. It is your turn to comment. 973-747. Please turn off your listening device, state your name for the record, and keep your comments under 3 minutes.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes, thank you, and good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, and other Montclair government officials. With all due respect, Mayor Spiller, I again wish to express my grave concern over your serving concurrently as both mayor of Montclair and as president of the New Jersey Education Association. And I've said before, and it's obvious, a conflict of interest exists. Now, as Montclair mayor, you're supposed to be without bias, unfettered by conflicting interests, and ideally completely open to all sides of issues facing our township, whether it's education, schools, teachers, police, roads, what have you. Now, last time I respectfully requested that you, Mayor Spiller, defend your position in this regard. After all the calls have been heard tonight, tell us tonight, Mr. Mayor, why you think no conflict of interest exists and how you can, without bias, serve two masters. Please, Mr. Mayor, speak out to us tonight. And others listening, I would urge them to urge the mayor to speak and express his opinion on this subject. And finally, I hope in the coming weeks and months, this town government and its citizens can have serious, peaceful, intelligent discussions and dialogue on any number of important subjects. Subjects like defunding the police, the spike in crime in many cities in this country, Black Lives Matter Global Foundation, the critical race theory, the 1619 Project, voting laws and rights in New Jersey and in other states in the country.
Mayor? Yeah. The gentleman's called many times, and I'm not going to address what he's asking, but I am going to address his overall points that he makes. I invite him to call me. I've discussed with many of the people in town who are supporters of the former president and who are active in the Republican Party. I've discussed directly with them, and I've tried to become very, very familiar with their views and respectful of them and have a dialogue with them. I teach political science. I've been teaching for many, many years, all sides of politics and government. I teach how great Teddy Roosevelt was as a Republican president. I've taught how Abraham Lincoln started that party. Eisenhower was the great president my father fought with in the war. Reagan did great things, and, you know, the wall came down. And then, you know, I hear people say things linking all these different issues. The gentleman just spoke about all these issues about, like, as if somehow everybody who has sort of a more progressive or liberal view is bad, or there's some kind of conspiracy by the people on the left. He's talking about voting rights in states. I just want to make it very clear, because I'm not fighting with the Republican Party. I'm fighting with the people who say things that are untrue. The president the other night said again that 1 million people were at the demonstration against the president's electoral college vote. 1 million people. There were 25,000 people by all counts, and several hundred went up to the Capitol, destroyed the building, broke into the offices of people, ransacked their desks, hurt police. When I saw Officer Fasone last night for about a half hour on TV, I could cry. My father was a sheriff's officer for 20 years. I worked in that office 1 year myself. I worked under the Attorney General, law enforcement. I believe in police. I believe in good policing. I do not want to defund. I want to redirect funds where we can from areas to do things to help people. I'm a very progressive liberal councilman. Most people don't understand that are calling in. I was the only supporter of Bernie Sanders in 2016 in Montclair on the council. I supported Bernie from the very beginning. So I'm a Bernie Sanders Democrat, okay? But I cannot understand this linking of everything, like that if you're a teachers union leader, which I am on the college level in AFT, New Jersey and Montclair State, that somehow I'm against police, you see? That somehow I and my fellow teachers caused riots and destruction in Seattle or Minneapolis. Whenever we talk about what happened on January 6th, people say, well, what about what happened in Seattle and Minneapolis? I'm against all of that. But to say like that the left or that progressives or liberals or Democrats caused all these terrible things, or that we actually created that scene on January 6th, this is all a big lie. There's differences of opinion we can have, but constantly attacking the mayor, myself, and others for saying that we should never let that happen again, or that, you know, we've had mayors in the past who've been business people or who had real estate interests and may have had a lot of different things that they did in their life that somebody could have accused them of being a conflict. When I was mayor, I was a teachers union leader at Montclair State. And I never shunned telling people that when I first started teaching in North, 200 of us were arrested for the teacher strike and spent months. Our president, Carol Graves, a black woman, spent 6 months in jail just for going on strike. What did we do that was so bad? Our salary started at $5,200. We got it up to $9,000. This is 1970. So 50 years of my work with the teachers union and with AFT lead me to respect anybody in that field. And I respect people in all their professions. But I do not like lies. I do not like criticism based upon fabrication. This thing on January 6th, it destroyed our country. I was mayor during 9/11. That was another terrible, terrible tragedy. But another foreign group of people came in with airplanes and destroyed the World Trade Center and went to Washington and did destruction. That wasn't our people. These are our own people who went to that Capitol with malicious intent, encouraged by other leaders that should never have encouraged it. And so I say, you know, I just have the greatest respect for Abraham Lincoln, Teddy Roosevelt, Dwight Eisenhower, Ronald Reagan, George Bush, both Bushes. And I respect very highly the courageous stand taken by someone like Liz Cheney. So this is my statement tonight. I don't want to talk about anything specific. I just want the gentleman who calls in every week to call me directly and we'll talk about it. But to try to put all things, talking about the Black Lives Matter, global conspiracies, the teachers are bad, the teachers caused the pandemic. Where's that coming from that we're trying to keep schools closed? I just taught my class last semester, half in, half out. 30 students in the classroom at Montclair State, 30 students on a Zoom on Friday. I did a great job. The students all got good grades. They learned a lot about cities and management, public administration, and politics. I'm a good teacher. I went to jail for my teachers union. Does that mean I can't be a good council member? I protest that kind of comment, and I think that it makes me a better council member that I did those things during my life and that I'm still a union leader of AFT New Jersey, Montclair Local, 6025, adjunct faculty, teaching at Montclair State. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
Mayor, may I make a comment, please?
Sure, Mr. Krasik.
We've heard several times the charge that the mayor is not qualified to serve because of his position with the New Jersey Education Association. And as the township attorney, I feel that, you know, I should at least respond to the conflict charge. It's very clear that nothing in the mayor's service as an official of the New Jersey Education Association either bars him or creates a conflict from his serving as mayor of Montclair, period.
Thank you, Mr. Krasik.
I think that should be clear, and I think that's a legal opinion.
Right. Thank you for that. Although I'll note, I think Councilman Russo said it with a lot more fire than you, just as an FYI. But thank you, Mr. Krasik. Mr. Stafford.
Thank you, sir. Next up would be caller with the number starting 201921. 201921, please state your name for the record. Keep your comments under 3 minutes and do us the service of turning off your listening device.
Yes, good evening. This is Ahava Felicidad. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Excellent. Good evening, Mayor and Council, and also the public. I am the president of the Tenants Organization of Montclair. We're an advocacy group created for rent control, to establish a rent control ordinance in the township and that be implemented, that being still in litigation. And I'd like to thank the township attorney, Mr. Krasik, for the update. So what I want to say tonight is just a reminder, rent control is actually the giraffe in this jungle. Not that Montclair is an actual jungle, but for purposes of a part of my statement and for your visualization. Giraffes are vital to keeping ecosystems in balance. Rent control is vital to keeping Montclair, New Jersey in balance. Better yet, hopefully bringing balance. Giraffes eat the browse that others cannot reach, which promotes growth of forage and opens up areas for themselves and other smaller browsers to make use of. Rent control on a parallel levels and stabilize rent so more of our resident renters can stay, grow, develop, and evolve in our beautiful township. We have to respect and acknowledge that many other things come after and beyond the rent being paid. We have been receiving, the Tenants Organization of Montclair Advocacy Group, still receiving contacts from tenants who are in fear about rent increases pending during the moratorium still, and those that have been illegally pushed through the moratorium due to lack of awareness. We ask that every tenant who can update a neighbor as we continue to see more openness to engage due to the waning of the pandemic. I must be clear, it's still waning. Not everyone has jumped back into social activity and engagement. Silence isn't empty, it's full of answers. We're presenting proclamations about our diversity. However, we continue to and just lost another multiracial, multicultural family this month. I'm getting messages from this resident since last week, but it started well over a month ago, now having been pushed out of the township due to an unconscionable landlord during the moratorium who refuses to respect the freeze. So once she moves, she is given permission to be identified, and we'll be following up with that so that you all know who that landlord or owner is, and we'll make it very clear that the behavior is not acceptable for our township, for anywhere. At the same time, we do have tenants who are staying in pocket, and they're standing up for their rights against all odds. Every volunteer in a building or house has come to us to address a personal complaint or issue in their rental home, not to just jump in and fight for everybody else, but their standing up for themselves has led to the breaking of the silence of others. Please continue to reach out to us at Tenants Organization Montclair at gmail.com. We continue to post what we call this public comments, appearances, talks, statements, presentations, virtually Tomb at the Council on Montclair Patch, where the public can find the call-in number as well as the access code. We check for the agenda as late as Monday night, usually earlier, to make sure that we have the right numbers for you all. And
Ms. Felicidad, that's down because your
post to our
time
Facebook.
expiring. Would you do us the service of concluding your comments, please? Thank you.
We will continue to post to our Facebook, Tomb Advocacy, so you can catch up on meetings, find out how to meet with us in and around town, both virtually and in person. Thank you very much. God bless everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you. Caller with the number starting 917545. It is your turn to comment. 917545. Please do us the service of turning off your listening device, state your name for the record, and keep your comments under 3 minutes. Thank you.
Hi, this is John Van Wagner calling. I'm calling again with the issue of rent control, but before I do, I want to make a brief response to Councilor Russo's answer to the previous caller about the inherent conflict of interest between Mayor Spiller's position as president of the N.J.S.A. and mayor. This caller asked a very simple and direct question, which the mayor has chosen not to answer. The councilor issued a rambling non sequitur about January 6th, Donald Trump, his own progressivism, Republicans that he respects. This, I respectfully say this is not about Bob Russo. Okay? The town attorney's legal opinion notwithstanding, this is a question that is a very serious one, as we have just experienced the lockdown of these schools for the last year and a half to the great detriment of some of the most underprivileged students in this town. So I respect the town attorney's opinion, but this is a question that needs to be answered, and it needs to be answered soon. Now, with regard to the issue of rent control, there are a few facts that I just want to bring up that I think have evaded this council so far. Rent control will reduce the property taxes for multifamily owners, which will then be transferred to single-family homeowners. Okay, the ordinance as written would require Montclair to start an entirely new regulatory department, which would incur legal fees, staffing costs, and other expenses, which would increase taxes or take resources from other areas. Now, the council and mayor have been approached numerous times with amendments that would make the ordinance fair for everyone in Montclair, but no progress has been made, especially with the mayor. Mayor Spiller is himself a landlord, but his property would be exempt under the ordinance as written. And now, instead of negotiating, the mayor and council have insisted on dragging out litigation that has now spent over a year in court. The mayor and the town clerk repeatedly denied Montclair registered voters' right to a referendum to certify the NPOA petition, an effort that was ruled arbitrary and capricious by the New Jersey Superior Court. Recently, the mayor publicly stated he supported a referendum where voters would decide how the school board would be chosen, should be chosen. That's a good step. But the question is, why can't voters be trusted to decide whether or not they want rent control? Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Caller with the number starting 917922. It is your turn to comment. 917922. Please do us the service of turning off your listening device, state your name for the record, and keep your comments under 3 minutes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Great. Hi, my name is Carol. I also would like to kind of respond to what Councilor Russo had said. He had a very passionate statement, but it did not really help to explain how there's not a conflict of interest in the mayor serving two masters. And even if it is legal for him to have both positions, it does not necessarily appear to be ethical. And also, you say that you're against people that create their opinions based on lies. Well, who determines what is a lie? What you consider a lie, others consider truth, and what you consider to be truth, others consider to be lies. Everything depends on the source of information that you trust. And for me, as a former Bernie Sanders supporter in 2016, I am surprised that you didn't become disheartened by the election process. I'm sure you saw, like I did, that the DNC colluded with the media to bring down Bernie. I mean, the media lied about Bernie. So, you know, it's hard to become, you know, a fan of the media and believe that they're truthful in everything when you see something like that. So anyway, that's something aside that I would like to say. What I wanted to do was to offer an alternative viewpoint to the group that's been quite vocal about the Montclair Beyond Policing. Apparently, they've been aligned with the National Defund the Police movement, which continues to be pushed despite its obvious flaws and failures. And on that note, I would like to read a segment of an article written by Tyler Durden on June 26, 2021. He says, anybody who wasn't living under a rock last summer surely remembers the wave of anti-police sentiment that swept across the U.S. The end result, as we have before this, is that thousands of cops from departments across the country have been quitting in droves. Now, a survey of nearly 200 police departments indicates that retirements rose 45% and resignations rose by 18% in the year between April 2020 and April 2021. The survey data was disclosed to the New York Times, which published them as the centerpiece of a lengthy story about the trials and tribulations facing police departments across the U.S. During the period in question, the New York police saw 2,600 police officers retire, compared with 1,509 the year before. Resignations in Seattle increased to 123 from 34, and retirements have risen to 96 from 43. Minneapolis, the former department of Officer Derek Chauvin, had 912 uniformed officers in May 2019. They're now down to just 699 sworn officers, and the department is struggling to find suitable recruits for its next class at the police academy. And all of this is happening amid a backdrop of worsening violent crime in America's city. Now, I had to laugh because someone
Ma'am,
put
that
together
sound
a
was your
series of-
time expiring, so please do us the service of concluding your comments. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so basically what I'm trying to say is that we need to take a look at what happened in all of these states and these cities before we start making any changes to the Montclair police budget. So that's all I needed to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next up would be caller with the number starting 954-529. 954-529. Please do us the service of turning off your listening device, state your name for the record, and keep your comments under 3 minutes.
Hi, this is Jason Gleason, Executive Director of Montclair Center Business Improvement District. I'm calling tonight in support of the township going after the Transit Village grant to bring a shared use path to Glenridge Avenue. As evidenced by our new strategic plan, the bid aims to support the township in its efforts to implement the primary recommendations of the Montclair Safe Plan and Unified Land Use and Circulation Plan within our great district. Whether or not the path ultimately connects to the proposed Essex Hudson Greenway, this project would create safe and welcoming and accessible paths connecting one of our main transit hubs directly to the heart of our downtown corridor, while providing alternate modes of transportation, both walking and biking, alleviating burden on our parking infrastructure, promoting good health, and especially good business. As a grant writing entity ourselves, we understand there's a window of opportunity, excuse me, in which these grants must be written, not to leave money on the table. And that being said, with the support of this body and authorizing the submission of this grant, we, the Montclair Center bid, look forward to working with the township to continue community outreach, consensus gathering, influencing the path design, and ultimately helping to bring forth the project that Montclair deserves and will ultimately cherish for years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next would be caller with the number starting 973-747. 973-747. Please do us the service of turning off your listening device, state your name for the record, and keep your comments under 3 minutes.
Good evening. This is William Scott. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, Mr. Scott.
I'm looking at the agenda tonight. There's several resolutions in regards to infrastructure and improvements to the water system and sewer system within the Township of Montclair. Has there been any discussion, and I guess I'm looking for a little transparency, in regards to activating the Nishwayne well in the township?
I'm sorry, Mr. Scott, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I don't recall any discussion, any substantive discussion with respect to the Nishwayne well in the last 5 or 6 years. Although I would invite comment by those folks on this virtual meeting if they recall it differently.
No, it's been about 5 or 6 years.
Okay, and that's appreciated from a transparency standpoint, because based on the amount of development that's taken place in the Township of Montclair, the amount of development that's still on the table to take place in Montclair, the contracts I believe that the township has with Glenfield as far as a source of providing services for Glenfield for water movement, whatever the case might be. Now we're looking at an infrastructure cost to all the residents in Montclair. So I'm just wondering if are we exceeding our capacity? What are we doing if we're spending, you know, millions and millions of dollars now moving forward with our infrastructure? Do we meet the demand? And if we haven't had the discussion about the initial well, I appreciate the fact that that discussion has not taken place without the public being aware of it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Caller with the number starting 908-499. It is your turn to comment. 908-499. Please do us the service of turning off your listening device, state your name for the record, and keep your comments under 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Paul King. I'm one of the board members of the skateboarding advocacy group Skate Ethics. I'm calling regarding the resolution to establish a permanent skate park in Montclair. First of all, I want to, on behalf of the skateboarding families here in Montclair, I want to take this opportunity to thank Mayor Spiller, Councilor Schlager, Jacobellis, and Councilor Russo for the guidance and support you've provided to help foster the joy of skateboarding here in Montclair. Also, Mr. Stafford, I want to thank you, Steve Wood, Michelle Camarada, the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee, and all their colleagues in the township for really making Rand Courts a place of happiness for our kids, especially during the challenging 15 past months that we've gone through with COVID. For the last 3 years, the skate park project has been a wonderful lesson for our kids, especially the Montclair High School Skate Club kids. We heard Antonello Tirana, the president, calling earlier this evening. That was wonderful. And it shows how a positive, constructive government interaction can truly make a difference in their lives. And this has been a great experience for all of us, and we want to thank you for that. I'm calling to urge the council to unanimously support the resolution to establish a permanent skate park in Montclair. The temporary skate park at Rand Courts is a hugely popular outdoor recreational and gathering space. It's popular because skateboarding adds a missing recreational option for Montclair's wide spectrum of kids, showing off our diversity. And with skateboarding being introduced for the first time in this year's Olympics, skateboarding's popularity will grow even more. So it's time to create a beautiful, professionally designed skate park within a park that's comfortable and enjoyable for parents and onlookers to relax and admire. It's time to create a beautiful skate park this township will be proud of. The resolution for the permanent skate park is the critical next step for our organization that we need to begin fundraising and accessing the grants that are available to us and to the township. So on behalf of the skateboarding families of Montclair, we urge you to please support this resolution so we can begin our fundraising efforts for a permanent skate park in Montclair. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Caller with the number starting 973-424. It is your turn to comment. 973-424, please. Towards the service of turning off your listening device. State your name for the record and keep your comments under 3 minutes. Caller 973-424.
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Great. Good afternoon, good evening, and hello. My name is Deirdre Malloy. I'd like to first say hello to Mayor Spiller and the council and everyone listening. Again, my name is Deirdre Malloy, co-chair, Montclair Housing Commission, chair of the Landlord Tenant Housing Committee. On May 25th, 2021, I received an email from Ira Karasik, which was later anonymously leaked to the press, asking the Landlord Tenant Committee to scale back, although he noted appreciation from himself and the governing body for the work of the committee. In October 2020, Ira mentioned concerns the committee not exceed its intended role. But November 2020, I was advised in a meeting that the township did not have the authority to regulate landlord-tenant matters and that I should manage my quote-unquote committee as such. The committee was established by council resolution in 1991 to continuously review housing problems in Montclair and make recommendations to the council, and shall, on request, inform landlords and tenants of their rights and obligations and be available to assist in resolution of disputes, which it continued to do since my becoming chair. It should have 18 members, but no new members have been approved by the council. The committee and I have provided critical information and resolved some of the most challenging matters during the pandemic until April 2021 without exceeding its intended roles. We are not attorneys. We never tell tenants to stop paying rent, ever. If anyone has told a tenant not to pay rent, it was not from the committee. Recently, certain residents were forwarded to me for help via email about their hardship and requested resources, which they received. But when other tenants contacted us regarding rent increases by $300 last month, I was told nothing could be done and I could not directly assist through the committee. The tenant received help in an unconventional method. Previously, rent increases were always resolved by a short fax letter to the landlords from the committee. The committee and I have been waiting, as promised, to hear from Mr. Karasik regarding next steps since May. When will the meeting occur? It is appropriate to not keep us in limbo. Also, why hasn't the council held a public meeting to discuss the status of the landlord-tenant committee? If a meeting is planned, when will it occur? Please, ladies and gentlemen, Ira Karasik, respectfully respond to the questions to provide answers to the committee and to the public. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Next would be caller with the number starting 908693. 908693. It is your turn to comment. Please do us the service of turning off your listening device, state your name for the record, and keep your comments under 3 minutes.
Brian Garnham again.
Mr. Garnham, I'm going to put you on mute because we have several other callers in the queue. So before we get to you for a second time, we will listen to everyone that would like to speak, and then I will defer to the chair of the meeting with regard to second callers. Caller with the number starting 201655. It is your turn to speak. 201655. Please do us the service of turning off your listening device, state your name for the record, and keep your comments under 3 minutes.
Good evening, Council. Mr. Mayor Spiller. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Fantastic. This is Derek Vita. I own the Green Room at 20 Church Street in Montclair, New Jersey. I just wanted to speak on behalf of some questions I had regarding the cannabis legislation that the board and council put out yesterday. Just a few questions whenever you guys have the opportunity to get to them. That'd be fantastic. Just looking over zoning, I do have locations in 6 different towns in New Jersey, so I've been trying to follow along the best I can what towns are deciding what options. Based off of what I was able to read between yesterday and today, it was a long document, so I'm happy I got to get through it. Just wanted to see specifically why the township decided on having retail specifically on Bloomfield Avenue for recreational adult use cannabis and not the other commercial districts in town. How come Montclair, unlike other towns like where I'm in Red Bank and Montclair, Red Bank and Hoboken are allowing for more than 2 facilities, and why Montclair specifically allowed for just 2, unlike Bloomfield neighboring, who's going to be most likely passing 6. I'm just trying to get some ideas from the council to see why we're kind of hindering development and growth in that section in town. And then in regards to some other things, looking at security, dispensaries, licenses, what other class licenses are going to be allowed in town. And then, yeah, pretty much everything. And then whenever you guys have a chance, you can get back to me as soon as you can, or I can tune in and listen later on. So thank you very much. Again, Derek from the Green Room in Montclair. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. And I think, Mr. Stafford, when those items are discussed, I'm sure some of that will come to the forefront, but thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Next would be caller with the number starting 973746. It is your turn to comment. 973746. Please do us the service of turning off your listening device, state your name for the record, and keep your comments under 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Maria Elena Marzullo. I am calling in support of the Aquilonia Way in the 4th Ward. The 4th Ward has been supporting that ward and others and adopted the seniors in Montclair and the police and fire departments, especially on days when all of us are rejoicing with our families and they are protecting us. In addition, they're supporting the Montclair State University. Prior to the pandemic, we had approximately 20 students that were coming to Montclair to support the exchange program, and unfortunately that had to be put on hold, and fingers crossed it will be on schedule for 2022. So again, I support the Montclair Aquilonia Way sign in the 4th Ward of Montclair. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor, there is no one else in the queue that hasn't spoken already, and given the determination that there will be no second chances this evening, given the lateness of the hour, I turn the meeting over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Stafford. Appreciate that. Thank you to all for the conversation. Appreciate that. The comments. Moving on, we do have a number of items to go through. The first one that we have is Ordinance O-21-14 for second reading. This is an ordinance amending Chapter 202 of the Land Use Procedures of the Township Code, Article 3, the provision applicable to both Planning Board and Zoning Board of Adjustments, update to escrow deposits. Would any one of my council colleagues, and I so move, any one of my council colleagues with comments or questions?
Second.
All right, hearing none, I'm going to open the public hearing without objection. Is there anyone in the dialing queue who wishes to be heard in relation to the proposed ordinance?
Mayor, there is no one in the queue.
All right, without objection, I'll close that hearing. Thank you very much. Therefore, Madam Clerk.
Councillor Cummings?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Hurlock?
Yes.
Councillor Price Abrams? Councillor Price Abrams? Nodding your head.
Yes.
Okay, very well, thank you. Councillor Russo?
Yes.
Councillor Schlager?
Yes.
Councillor Yacobelis?
Yes.
Mayor Spiller?
Yes. All right, next we have new ordinances. Madam Clerk, would you please note they've been properly noticed, please?
Yes, Mayor, these are new ordinances, so no notice was required, but the ordinance that we just did, the second reading ordinance, that was noticed as required by law.
Excellent, thank you so much, appreciate that. Next, we have Ordinance O-21-17, which is an ordinance to provide for the regulation of cannabis businesses in the Township of Montclair, and I so move.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. And again, this one is to one of the previous callers' comments and questions, and I said it would probably come up in this part of the conversation. As I know my colleagues know, this was an area that was discussed as appropriately put to the EDC to review. The EDC has had a number of discussions on this, including with our attorney, looking at a number of other ordinances, as the caller noted, in some other towns that have moved forward, other towns that haven't moved forward, looked at all the different pieces. Assessed what potentially could work here in town, and have come back with the set of recommendations here. As a note to the public, there is a time frame on some of these pieces. That time frame requires us to have in place a number of different guidance pieces, ordinances around it, or we would basically, or any town has to be subjected to all of them, meaning you get everything, or the alternative is to opt out of everything. And then, of course, come back at some later date and try and add pieces on. So a little bit to what the caller noted, and I think it's going to be related in the discussion really of all three of these. But again, it'll broadly discuss as we're talking about all three. the committee, the subcommittee that looked at this, and certainly will allow my colleagues, and again, I may as well good moment here to really thank Councilman Schlager for the many hours that she put in on this, Councilman Iacobellis for the many hours that he put in on this as part of that subcommittee looking at this. But certainly the idea was to be more restrictive. We can open this up to allow more at any given time. So again, when the caller says, hey, how come we're not Bloomfield doing 6? How come we're not allowing it in any other places, or whatever also the pieces are that he was noting? The idea here is, we have had a positive experience with medical marijuana here in town. We likely feel there'd be a positive experience with recreational sale as well. We also feel that certainly the voters here, as they have throughout the state, have spoken to much of that issue and are generally supportive here in Montclair. But that said, we still wanted to be certainly cautious in how we started out. And therefore, that is the recommendation that the full body is seeing from that subcommittee. It's a recommendation of a pretty tight space in terms of framework around what we would be allowing. And then, of course, at any time, literally at any given time, we could expand that. And I would argue, if we're seeing success in what we're seeing in terms of what comes, if we're seeing no challenges, if it's working, that would be the opportunity to expand. The other argument in terms of why we did perceive to move forward, we are one of a few locations that actually have had marijuana in their town for quite some time, again, with no negative experiences. And additionally, we know there's an opportunity to get ahead in a sector, in an area that we've had some experience in, as I noted, but is going to be new, certainly throughout the state more broadly. So that's certainly a little bit of the thinking of my council colleagues, at least the subcommittee, and certainly would like to have them opine if I missed anything or any other pieces they'd like to add. So Councilman Iacobellis and then Councilwoman Schlager, if you'd like to add. So Councilman Iacobellis.
Thanks, Mayor. So I do think it's important to note for the public that these votes tonight are to put these items on the council agenda on August 10th and to schedule that public hearing. These votes are not to enact this into law. So those are the votes we're taking tonight. So I think it's important that the public has that context. And as you said, it's far from perfect. It is the art of compromise in a town with different opinions and different dynamics, and on a governing body with many different opinions and different dynamics. And, as you know, because we had our conversations and, I've had with, I think, most of you, I'm certainly not getting, everything I would like to see, which would be, definitely enabling these establishments to be in many more zones around Montclair. But I respect the council and the guidance that I've received from some of you, frankly, and some other third parties in terms of being careful and taking our time. So I do subscribe to that it is something new. It is something that's worth testing out. But I also subscribe to the belief that, we should at some point permit consumption on premises in a really controlled and safe and, guided environment, and I would like to see that. I believe strongly in letting the marketplace, dictate, what works. So I'm excited and hopeful that we will pass this with the intent to do one of every kind of license, 2 for retail, so that we can see what the market decides to do with Montclair, what the demand is like, what the business environment actually supports, what our infrastructure as a town supports in terms of the economy. So I do believe this is a really careful and important first step, and just want to reiterate again that tonight's vote is to simply put these items on the agenda for August 10th and schedule that public hearing for August 10th. It is not a vote to pass or not pass recreational cannabis in Montclair. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councilwoman Schlager.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Councilman Iacobellis said it very well, but I also would like to say this is a good start. This is just a starting point to move forward. And we're going to test the water, see how it goes. We're going to see what the market will bear. And it's a very good first step. It's coming. Cannabis is coming. And I think we have to be open-minded about this and move forward.
Thank you,
Mayor,
Councilwoman.
Mayor, I would just like to explain why there are three ordinances briefly, if you don't mind. So,
Please, Mr. Kress.
the reason there are three ordinances, this is more for the public, but I suspect the council as well. The first one creates a licensing scheme and permits a certain number of cannabis businesses in the township. The second is an ordinance to impose a tax on the sales of marijuana, which amends our tax law. And the third is an amendment to our zoning law, which establishes locations, permissible locations for the cannabis businesses. Because of the way our code is structured, it's been divided into three ordinances, but they're really a unity in terms of the introduction of marijuana as businesses and implementation of the state law in Montclair. I just thought that might help.
I think it does, but thank you for that. Appreciate that. Okay, so with that, that's the thinking of the committee that worked on it. That's the task. That's what we were charged to work on. That's what we did. That's the recommendation we've come forward with and have moved tonight. And with that, I'll open up to council comments, questions. Councilwoman Price Abrams.
Thank you, Mayor. And I do want to thank my colleagues on the Economic Development Committee, for crafting a meaningful set of conditions that are, responsibly permit, a new activity in terms of legalized cannabis for our town. We know that a vast majority of people in the state, but also a high majority of people in this town did support it. So I think you've carved out some thoughtful considerations for the retail sale and other, licensed activities in the supply chain. I do have a few, considerations and thoughts with regard to, where you've carved out some particular areas in town and left off some others. And so I do understand the idea of starting small. And I do want to ask that we would, I will offer my vote to move this forward to get it on the agenda, but I would like us to consider maybe a few other streets. If we're talking about Bloomfield Avenue, I don't know from what point on, but that there are side streets that are sort of all contiguous in that same business district, which I think would make sense potentially. If it's a few doors down from Bloomfield Avenue, it's very largely part of the same feel and area of town that you the committee had pulled together. So if I could have that consideration that we would cover that, and I don't know, maybe ask Mr. Karasik, do we need to amend that tonight, or is that something that we can work on? And would we come back next week and then do the final vote? How would we do that if there was a willingness to amend this?
Well, this is somewhat new territory because the state laws are novel, and particularly the restriction on prohibition in the future. However, what you're suggesting is opening it up to more locations. And in my opinion, based upon the state law, the council at any time in the future could amend this ordinance to add additional locations and in other ways to liberalize, in a sense, add more licenses. What we can't do is add restrictions in the future, at least for the next 5 years after August 22nd. We can't add restrictions, but we can open it up more. So the answer is that yes, to do what you want to do, it would require an amendment to what's written in front of you. However, that amendment could be made in the future. Is not subject to the deadline.
Well, no, but I do mean that the ordinance that we would enact in time for the state deadline, if we could, agree in the next week, and we didn't have a council meeting, I don't know if that requires, I don't know that we don't need to table it if there's an agreement. If we could come back for a vote with some amended language that, potentially the committee and others, a majority of the council would agree to take forward.
I don't want to open a can of worms, but the ordinance could be amended on tonight or on the 20th if you had, and still make the deadline. It's going to require an emergency resolution, but the answer is yes, but not after that. I mean, to get enacted by the deadline.
Okay, I mean, I think it does. I think we can do it next week is what you're saying. We would approve this, I don't know what the right term is, on first reading.
Yeah, well,
But then
the clerk has to have time to publish it, and it also has to go to the planning board, the zoning piece of it. I believe there's a planning board meeting coming up between, in a timely fashion, I think on the 26th. But in any case, you know, there's a whole, there are a few moving parts here in the schedule. But I believe that you could let me just take a look. Yeah, it could be amended either tonight or on the 20th.
Okay, because I would be willing to help move it forward at the same time that I appreciate the opportunity to participate, you know, with my colleagues, just to maybe make some mild refinements to, again, within the general vicinity of where has already been approved. I would like to make another comment, and you know, I just found it of interest that we did include 250 feet from schools, and I'm not specifically, well, here's what I am specifically saying. 2 schools actually opened on Seymour Street and one somewhere in the vicinity of where our current dispensary is, the medical marijuana dispensary. I think it tends to be, it's sort of mixing up public policy agenda items with what we think about from the past where there were drug-free school zones. And I think that was meant to protect against what were illicit drugs and the potential sale of them near schools, and that would potentially be the sale to minors and to children and other things that we would all, I think, agree those were meaningful. But these facilities will be a bit like a liquor store, but it's significantly more secure. I mean, that's what we're talking about. And I just think that the idea that their distance from a school is a little bit, I appreciate that you put it in out of a sense of, you know, some kind of concern, but I think it's, I just don't agree that it's necessary. I don't know that we're going to change that language, but I just wanted to state for the record that I think that these are going to be legal businesses, you know, selling a legal product like alcohol that will be highly regulated and that will be highly secure. And so I don't think there is a likelihood of minors getting access through those facilities. And therefore, I frame that as the consideration of where else in town in the future we might want to consider amending. I think starting small is meaningful, and I appreciate 2 licenses on the retail side, and I appreciate the consideration that we might just bump out a little bit more in the Bloomfield Avenue corridor. So I thank you for those.
Just to respond, if you don't mind, Council Mayor, if I might to respond to this. You know, when the state, when the cannabis was legalized, it no longer became a controlled substance, and therefore the state essentially took it out of the school zone prohibitions that had created penalties for use of drugs or sale of drugs within a school zone. This part was left in this ordinance. The number of feet was reduced, but it was left in. But again, it's certainly a debatable piece. In other words, each situation has to be looked at. So I don't know. I think the council has to think about what they think the best position is. There are reasons. Some council people have suggested reasons why it should be there. Some have suggested more, some have suggested less. So it is a policy matter, and but it's in here because the state law has been removed.
And certainly, Councilwoman, great points, and appreciate that, sharing those. I think that the thinking in the subcommittee, just for the public as well, and for your benefit, was really, we concur, I think, with hearing your thinking of, you know, trying to be open enough and allowing enough and a space, even as Councilman Iacobellis noted, for the industry to kind of, you know, take foot and see what regulates itself and goes in. but also coming at it from the perspective of trying to, start in a pretty tight space. I say that word not physically, but I mean in all the parameters we put around it. Just because, as the attorney noted, we can open up any of these at any moment. We can relax things, but once we've relaxed it, we are bound to keep it that way, right? So that was the real worry. But certainly, I'll speak for myself. Happy to look at, if you've got some other streets you'd like to suggest or some other, I think that's a great part of the conversation. But just knowing all of us that, anywhere we open it to, we can't then be like, oh, that didn't work out, and we were trying to close it back down. We can't do that. So just, I think if we start with, we've had success with one, medical, and I think we expand here and move into another phase, I think, and we have success. Hey, I think that quite frankly sells itself, and we'll all be sitting there saying, hey, we'd like to move it over to here, open it up to there, and grow with it. But also somewhat responsibly, if God forbid, something isn't working quite right in a space, or we see a problem, we say, "Ooh, man, let's not go into that area. Let's not do that because of these reasons or problems that it may have caused." But certainly to your point, open to, I think personally, for me, again, talking about some of those other streets, certainly something I'm open to having that conversation. The school piece, I think you actually make a very good point there. But having a little restrictions in place and loosening that over time to get to a place where even the public just starts to be more and more comfortable with what we're talking about. I think that may be a thing there, but open for discussion. And yes, so thanks.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other Councilman Russo?
Yeah, so to take off on what Councilor Price Abrams said, I've been involved with this for many, many years. The medical marijuana facility was set up, I think, almost 10 years ago now, and it was very, very positive thing. I've always advocated for it. I spoke with our police chief, Conforti, at a statewide meeting held to promote this in Plainfield a few years ago, and he and I were saying Montclair is sort of a model. We didn't have one complaint in all those years from residents about this. Now we're taking another step. It's a different step. I was at the opening of the renamed or repositioned Ascend, which was on Bloomfield Avenue, where the old Greenleaf Compassion Center was. And I was urging them at that time, a year or so ago, to continue the great work with medical marijuana so that we'd have, the same great record of no problems. Not that we anticipate problems, but this is a whole different area now. Everybody can have access. It's adult use. I just talked today to people who said to me, please let there be one right near me. Like, somebody in Upper Montclair said, can you put one up here on Valley Road, way up here near the college? Well, we know what that might mean. I'm just concerned as a professor up there for student access. And then somebody else I saw in the South End when I was getting flowers for my wife said, can we have one down here? Well, now, I would like to discuss, as I think Lori Price Abrams has asked, a little more about this, where we're going to be putting, because I see in the ordinances that we have with us, there's definite specific locations which seem to be very limited, and they may not be as, they may not be the only places we should have. I just have more questions. And I also have this question I've asked the town attorney. If the state didn't put its regulations forward yet, and I'm a big state regulator working for Attorney General's office for 20 years before I retired 15 years ago, the regs were always put out before we did the enforcement and we did the final, ordinances in towns, I thought. And if the state is taking longer than we thought, the League of Municipalities, which we've always been a member of, and the Conference of Mayors, they were urging people to just vote no and to opt out until the state did its regulations, which is due by the 21st of August. I have to ask again to Ira, we certainly don't want to jeopardize or be locked into something or locked out of something. Can you explain again the choices we have to make by going forward with this? Do we lock ourselves into 10 to 5 years of what we've passed? Or is that superseded by what the state may do by August 21st, which they should have done prior to our doing this? Very honestly, the state legislature could have adopted a bill giving us 2 more months. it baffles me as a person who's been involved with the state legislature that Assemblyman Tully put a bill in and it went nowhere and they've adjourned, and I understand that, but you know, he was trying to give us all 2 more months so we could see what the state regulations were first and then do ours. It's like the cart before the horse to me. But I'm very supportive. Overall, I'm very supportive of this because I know the group worked hard, the committee worked hard. I know this has been ongoing and I've been involved for years with this, and I've been an advocate maybe more than anyone else of making this legal and accessible and helpful to people who have problems beyond just, you know, the medical. But I have this concern about, can we wait a week maybe and get some things cleared up? And maybe it's my own fault. I've been busy with the family this week, but it is something I'd like to have a little more time on. So Ira, what is what are our choices and alternatives and parameters here?
You asked a lot of questions, but let's try to boil it down. First of all, the legislature did not pass any extensions. There was a bill introduced, but it went nowhere. And the legislature, I believe, is not, the Senate, I believe, is out of session now and won't be back, as far as I know. In any case, the law that was passed by the state required municipalities or authorized municipalities, gave them the power to create regulations and restrictions on cannabis businesses. The state created 6 classes of cannabis businesses. Municipalities are allowed to permit 1 or more licenses for each of those businesses, or prohibit those businesses from being in their town. One of the businesses is cannabis delivery services, although we can prohibit cannabis delivery services from operating out of Montclair, we can't prohibit them from delivering to Montclair. So essentially, we have a choice. How many permits do we want to give? We also have the ability to regulate where they're going to go and certain other regulations regarding their business operations. If whatever restrictions we want to put has to be in place by August 22nd. It was 180 days from the time the law became effective. If they're not in place, then cannabis retailers, which is the store that sells cannabis products, the retail store, can be located in any commercial district in the town, period. And certain other businesses could be located like wholesalers and growers and stuff could be located in any industrial district. We don't happen to have industrial districts. But in any case, if we want to put restrictions on cannabis businesses, we have to do that by August 22nd. If not, we can't act for 5 years. So that's what's creating this deadline that we're talking about. Now, some towns have chosen to prohibit all cannabis businesses. It's called opting out of the law. And at any time in the future, they can opt back in for either one type of business or all types of businesses. That's been a choice of some towns. Other towns, like our neighboring town, Bloomfield or Bayonne, have opted to allow cannabis businesses, which is what is on the table here with restrictions. So your choices really are, if you want to put regulation on the number of businesses, the location, et cetera, you have to do it by August 22nd. Whatever prohibitions you put in can be relaxed at any time in the future, but you can't add new prohibitions for 5 years. And 5 years from now, if you do, anybody that's here already are grandfathered. In other words, you can't kick out any business that's already located during the time when there were no prohibitions. That's the state law. Does that answer your question, or do you still have more?
Well, my concern is you're saying if we opt out, we can always opt back in. But if we opt in, we can't opt out. If we opt in and do this now, we're locked into this for 5 years unless what the state does in a month supersedes what we do.
Oh, right. You asked about the regulations. I'm sorry. The Cannabis Control Commission, in fact, met today, and they had a public meeting, which I was listening to, and didn't give me a lot of confidence, at least, as to when their regulations would be done, but they seem to be working hard on regulations regarding applications. But yes, the state Cannabis Regulatory Commission has the authority to implement regulations regarding any aspect of cannabis business. If the regulations conflict, nothing's been done about this, but it appears that if the Cannabis Regulatory Commission's regulations conflict, for instance, if they say that towns can't have more than 3 licenses or according to population or something like this, then that would override anything that we do. So it's possible that regulations that are issued by the Cannabis Regulatory Commission can conflict and override with regulations that we impose. But there's no telling whether that will be the case or not. They're supposed to place initial set of regulations by August 22nd. Also, however, initial is initial. They could add regulations for the next 10 years, and we're going to have to live with that. So the answer is yes. We don't know what the regulations are going to be. We don't know once they are there how much they would affect the municipal government. Some people believe, with goodwill and reasonably, that municipalities shouldn't act until regulations have been issued. Others since we don't know what they're going to be, have said, no, let's go forward. I guess that's the best answer I can give you.
Well, then what you're saying is that if we pass this now, we're locked into it. We can't make it more restrictive for 5 years, but we could put other locations in which liberalize it.
Yeah, like we're allowing, according to the way this law is written, you're allowing 2 retailer licenses in the town, 2 retail operations. If next year you decide, hey, these 2 are going great, we want to add 2 more, you could do that. You could change the law to say we're going to allow 4 permits instead of 2 permits. That's the kind of thing that could be that's less restrictive. You can't say we're going to only have 1 permit.
So we can't restrict it further. What bothers me is we're locked in for 5 years, and we need maybe a little more time to discuss it. I'd like to discuss some of Lori's ideas, and that's where I'd like a little more time. I'm sorry.
Well, that's of course, that's not for me to say. I mean, the point I gathered, I'm listening to the mayor's point that the idea of starting small was the way of trying to address that concern. But that's again, I shouldn't be in the policy discussion among you. That's
No. Well, I support this, except I'd like a little more time, and if we could have another week, that would be very helpful to me.
I'd like to say something there again, and Bob, this is the point I was making earlier. The point of tonight's vote is to put this on the agenda for August 10th. That is when the public hearing would be. That is when we would be voting to enact this into law or not. That's the vote tonight. We're not voting to enact these policies into law. And I do think there is a lot of value in municipalities crafting legislation like this. In fact, I think the Cannabis Regulatory Commission are looking to places like Montclair to create this type of legislation to help see what the experiment ends up looking like. And I think with what we've crafted, which is very restrictive and very careful and very delicate, that there's not much harm in putting that out. And if the state were to come through with something that was even more restrictive than what we're doing, first of all, I'd be very surprised by that, but then it would supersede and it would overrule it anyway. And I don't see where the harm is in that.
Ira, can I just ask a question regarding, I'm looking at section 110.4 on licensing, where it reads section B, under no circumstances shall a municipal license for a cannabis establishment, distributor, or delivery service issued by the town council be effective unless and until the state has issued the requisite permits or licenses to operate such a facility. So are we enacting something that, according to this, seems to read, and I could be wrong, that it's not effective until the state makes up a decision?
The way the law is written, municipalities have the right to impose their own licensing requirements on top of state licensing requirements. A large part of the state law lays out the state licensing requirements and the application, et cetera, and those licenses that every business that engages in cannabis, either selling at retail or whatever, has to have a state license from the Cannabis Regulatory Commission. In order to get one, they have to go through a very rigorous application process. But one little paragraph in the law says municipalities have the right to impose their own licensing requirements. And so one of the requirements of a state license is that the municipality approve the state license. So what we're doing essentially is saying, okay, we're going to approve the state license by approving a local license. If you can't get our license, then we're not going to approve your state license. So essentially, it's a two-step process. They would come to us, get a license, and go to the state.
Can you explain that? But can you explain what Section B says to me, please?
Well, what you just read?
Yeah.
Wait a minute. I'm sorry. Just let me go back.
When I see under no circumstances.
Yeah, we're not going to give that. It said, even if we issue a license, they can't operate unless they get a state license. In other words, if we issued a license first, it doesn't matter. They still have to have a state license. And that's what the state law says. State law doesn't let anybody operate without their license, regardless of what the municipality says or doesn't say.
Okay.
So,
and then another is just, well, first of all, let me say that I think this is going to happen. I wish we had a little bit more, and I understand what Peter's saying, public comment on August 10th. I think we really need to make sure that the public understands they get out here. And I say public, meaning, currently, I'd like to know, so we have a 250-foot, feet block. What came up? Why was 250 feet the number? And then the question of, schools, I also wonder, are houses of worship allowed to kind of not have it around, stores near them? Or are these conversations that we can have to add or adjust, as Councilor Abrams has suggested?
If I think it's noted, if the conversation is something that we have for our next week, we can modify it and make modifications, and then it would go to that hearing, which would still allow time, and then we would have to act by that date to make sure have the safeguards in place.
So over the next couple of weeks, or we can send in modifications that we'd like to be considered that can be added to this.
Not next couple of weeks, next week.
Well, the next week. And does that go to increasing the number of locations and things like that? I mean, we're in commercial zones. I get it. I just want to make sure there's some clarity of how we could potentially, adjust what we've been receiving.
Yeah, so I think exactly to maybe the councilwoman's point before and Ira's emphasis, we can look at anything in the next week, right? And certainly look to add pieces in there. I would only, and to the ones who are cautious on here, I would only argue and remind everyone that we cannot shrink it back down in any way, right? We can always expand it at any time to anything that we're even thinking about over the next week. We can always add that at any time. So I'm not to dissuade that. So if there's some definite things that we are like, absolutely, we want to include something like this because it's definitely 100% a great idea. Let's do it, right? But I would just note that if we're even, if we're not sure on any level, or if anyone's cautious, or if anyone wants the public to try it out for a while, we've crafted something we feel as a committee that it still allows this to happen, but is about as restrictive as possible to still give people the comfort to be okay with it. And remember, I'm making this up, we wouldn't do this, but 3 weeks after, we can add more, we can always expand more. I don't think we'd ever do anything that quickly. We'd want more time to see, but you get my point. We can always add on what we would like at absolutely any time.
And I think part of this is good that we're starting this now, because I got to tell you, when I look at the potential revenue, are we open, and I'm throwing this out here now, are we opening to using this revenue for specific projects to aid and do things such as, okay, we got the conversation about the skate park. Well, can we as a governing body consider setting aside percentage of this revenue here to go towards whatever funding may be required for some things like that? I think we should start. That's where I'm saying I like a little bit more discussion to figure out how can we make this a little bit user friendly, as well as say, okay, you want a license here? Well, this is what we want in return. To be able to, leverage this, because it seems there's a lot of interest in coming to Montclair. I want to make sure that we're able to leverage and get as much out of it as we possibly can for all residents.
Could I say, Mayor, I have to speak on this. We can't dedicate the money unless the state authorizes by statute and allows us to dedicate money from a revenue stream. It has to go into the general fund. That's a very strict law. The state's very, very careful about that because of the way in which the local budget law and the local fiscal affairs law interact to sort of protect its fiscal controls. As far as getting the money out of it, anything you want to get out of this licensing process has to be in the ordinance. You can't, we can't negotiate with potential cannabis businesses and say, well, and have an auction or something like this. I'm not sure that's what you meant, but I just mean we can't sort of wheel and deal to try to get the best deal. Whatever criteria we have for selection and for evaluation of business has to be in the ordinance.
So we can say, if you want to, for purchasing or getting a license in Montclair, we could put a fee on it, but it has to be in the ordinance.
Yeah, and there is one.
And we have those fees, Councilman, right? So we've added fees that are absolutely on par with the most aggressive that are that have been introduced. That was part of the committee's look at. We also, as I'm sure everyone here knows, you are allowed to tax it per the state. We have those amounts at the maximum amounts as well. So there would be, to your point, Councilman, and you heard from the attorney, we can't dedicate the funds, but certainly I know everyone out here, and we all struggle with, how we maximize, dollars that don't come from residents and those taxes. And this is an opportunity certainly to have extra dollars that would come in to, fund many of the worthwhile things that we know, quite frankly, have taken a little bit of a hit in pandemic with our short revenues, but also beyond and above that, in general time. So short answer is the dollars would be there. To your point, Councilman, we've included those in this. That was one of the big considerations we looked at. Hopefully they would provide us some dollars, even though not dedicated to use in areas of support for community things.
So I apologize. I didn't see what are those fees?
Mr. Carrasco can speak to all of them because we've got them in a lot of different places. The tax rate.
Yeah, I see them now.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, this is, to me, these can be more.
Well, and I think that's the point too, Councilman. I think, starting with 2 and one of every other type is somewhat intentional and waiting to see what the marketplace tells us, right? Because the marketplace may tell us, we'll see what happens in Bayonne and Bloomfield and other places that are doing this, that you can get $50,000 for a license instead of $10,000. We'll see what happens, and I think that's why I agree with starting in a measured and careful way to see what potential is there without giving away everything in the beginning. And I know some people are, going to be frustrated with that because they want more upfront, but just being transparent, that is something that we want to be thinking about. We get most of our revenue obviously in town from property taxes and from parking violations and things like that. This is another revenue stream that we could potentially expand over time if we're strategic.
Councilwoman Price Abrams.
Thanks, Mayor. I meant to make a different point earlier as well, and I wanted to acknowledge that the initiative to pass this at the state level had a strong social justice component, and that was the thrust of the legislators as well as the governor in signing it. And I did want to acknowledge and commend you, the folks who helped to draft this, that within the evaluation items for selecting those parties who we would permit, with our 2 retail licenses, and I'm not sure if it applies to the other sections, but that whether you have a qualification as either a minority-owned, women-owned, or veteran-owned business is something that will actually yield higher points in our estimation in terms of what value it brings to town. And I just really think that is part of the soul of this that I just wanted to emphasize and appreciate, because I think that does go to those objectives, which I personally endorse as well. So I wanted to thank you for that.
Well, Councilwoman, we appreciate you, highlighting that, and certainly we heard your voice, in our discussions around that. Absolutely, you note, as the state has emphasized that piece, and town attorney can speak. We specifically went to him and said, hey, let's try and maximize those components in there as much as we can, and he followed suit. So thank you for acknowledging and noting that, but that's also the case. And Councilman Cummings, just even to fees, we have had our attorney search all of them throughout the state, and that he was able to find. Granted, they're popping up all the time at this point, as you imagine, with the timelines, but he has selected the most aggressive fees of any town that he found.
And we will look, Mayor, at what happens in the next week, because I suspect a lot of towns are in the same position we're in right now. And if we'll take another survey, so to speak, and try to get the most up-to-date information for the next council meeting.
And Ira, just final clarity, as you and I have gone back and forth. If we were to opt out of this right now, and the CRC, which is supposed to release its regulations on the 22nd, could we then opt in with what we have right here on the 23rd or the next appropriate council meeting?
No, because we would, if we, oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. If you said if we opt out right now, could we opt in after we opt? Yeah, I mean, I don't know, but on the 23rd, I mean, there's a logistical.
Well, what I'm saying is after the state, after the CRC is supposed to announce its guidelines on the 22nd.
The answer
the deadline for us is the 21st.
As I understand it, the answer is yes. As I understand it.
Let me finish answering my question. Okay. So after the 22nd, they send out their guidelines. We know what their guidelines are. We then can say, okay, if what we have here fits, we then can say, this is the ordinance we want to send out. We will at least have the knowledge of what the state is saying, or what the state has acknowledged will be the regulations.
Well, as I understand it, the answer to the question is yes, that if you opt out and totally prohibit everything, you can opt in at any time after that, be it next month or next year. And you can wait until the regulations come out. As I said, some towns are doing that and have specifically said that, and others aren't. So,
yeah, that's my. To be honest with you, that's the one thing that sticks me to this is I don't see why we wouldn't wait until the CRC put its regulations out, considering that it's so close to the date. I don't even understand why the state would make the deadline the 21st and then they announce the regulations 22nd. That's a different conversation.
The state set it up this way. So, I mean, in a certain sense, it's odd, and I'm not saying there must be a reason, because the legislature has its own thinking, but they set it up that they said we have to we have to put any restrictions in within 180 days, which comes out to that date. And the CRC has to adopt its NIFA regulations in the same time frame. So the state knew they were creating this morass a little bit, but so.
And to your point, Councilman, it's a great point, and certainly our committee considered that carefully. It was certainly part of our discussions. We tried to get as much data on that. Just to share with you a little of the thinking around that. One, I will tell you, knowing when the state comes out with regulations, we're not convinced that they will meet that deadline and come out with their regs at that deadline, number one. Secondly, as Mr. Karasik noted, it's likely they will continue to just constantly add regulations over time. But third, we also looked for something that we felt we would be comfortable with in suggesting to this full body, despite and whatever those regulations would be, right? We didn't, kind of come up with something and say, we're not sure what they're going to say, and if they do, we'll change this to do that. We're pretty comfortable, right, with what we're recommending in terms of we think this is the right fit for Montclair. Quite frankly, potentially expand it beyond that, but for now, for the reasons we've cited over and over, pretty restrictive. But we're pretty comfortable with that as a committee based on whatever the regulations are that they're coming out with. But we didn't take it lightly. It's a good point. We thought about it, but those were part of the reasons why we acted as such. Any other questions, concerns, comments? Deputy Mayor Herlock.
Thank you, Mayor Spiller. Yeah, I have a lot of questions on this one, and I appreciate the time that you put into this, Mr. Krasik. I know you've spent quite a bit of time on it as well. I have a lot of questions on this. And again, the state regs are not in place. I don't understand the rush. Somebody had mentioned putting the cart before the horse. I couldn't agree more. I look at the cost. I don't see how this 2% tax is going to cover some of the things that we're going to need to cover as a town. I mean, it's 2% of the revenue. Someone's going to have to look at those books to make sure we're getting the 2%. That's going to be a new person in finance. We can do the opt-in at any point. I'm reading New Jersey articles here on newjersey.com where a lot of towns have opted out just because there's way too many variables in place here. Having spoken with Chief Conforti, my understanding is at this moment, the state hasn't even come up with the legal limit if you are impaired, like you are with alcohol. So there won't be any effort to try to pull cars over if people are impaired with marijuana, because there's legally no legal limit into what your impairment is. So I don't, I hope we all respect each other when we're having these conversations, and I don't read in the press next week that my positions are absurd or anything, but I'm not in favor of this at all. I understand it's getting the process started, and we'll have August 10th, and there'll be hearings and everything, but the train's leaving the station, and the state hasn't come up with the regs, which to me is just preposterous. And the fact that, there are all these variables, it's just too much for me to swallow. So I'm going to vote no on these tonight. And I believe it was Councilman Russo who said the cart before the horse. So I just remembered that, giving credit where it's due. But I understand the work that was put into this. I appreciate it. Hopefully everybody appreciates my position on this, and we'll go from here. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sir, thank you very much. Any other questions, concerns, comments? Okay, seeing none. Madam Clerk?
Counselor Cummings?
No.
Deputy Mayor Herlock?
No.
Counselor Price Abrams?
Yes.
Counselor Russo?
I didn't understand what we're voting on. I thought we're voting to delay this 1 week.
This is Ordinance O-21-17.
No, I'm abstaining. I'm abstaining right now.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Schlager?
Yes.
Counselor Yacovelis?
Yes.
Mayor Spiller?
Yes. Next is Ordinance O-21-18, which is an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance 347 to provide for the regulation and the location of cannabis businesses, and I so move.
Second.
It's It's been moved and seconded, and I think spoken to. Any questions, concerns, comments? Madam Clerk?
Counselor Cummings?
Yeah, I did have a question. This goes to what Councilor Price Abrams was discussing about locations and potentially increasing the boundaries, and to what Councilor Russo seemed to be indicating in his previous question. I'm asking that for clarification.
What this does is establish the places, locations in the township where cannabis businesses can operate. I think there were comments suggesting that it be other locations be added, but that's not what you're voting on. At least that's not what's in front of you. What's in front of you is the ordinance as written.
Thank you, Ira. My vote is no, Angeles.
Thank you, Counselor Cummings. Deputy Mayor Hurlock?
No.
Counselor Price Abrams?
Yes.
Counselor Russo?
I'm abstaining again.
Counselor Schlager?
Yes.
Counselor Yacobelis?
Yes.
Mayor Spiller?
Yes. Next is Ordinance O-21-19, which is ordinance to provide for municipal sales and use taxes on certain cannabis-related transaction in the Township of Montclair, and I so move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any questions, concerns, or comments on this item? I believe it's been spoken to. Hearing none, Madam Clerk?
Counselor Cummings?
No.
Deputy Mayor Hurlock?
No.
Counselor Price Abrams?
Yes.
Counselor Russo?
Let me just say something here, because I'm one of the foremost advocates of this, and I'm going to support this ultimately, but I thought we were going to take another week to discuss changes or adopt amendments that Councilor Price Abrams was suggesting. So I have no choice but to abstain.
Counselor Schlager?
Yes.
Counselor Yacobelis?
Yes.
Mayor Spiller?
Yes. Thank you very much. Next,
Mayor,
we have.
I'm sorry, Mayor, excuse me. If I may, just for clarification to Councilman Russo, with some conversation we just had, there was a willingness that we would bring forward some revisions, particularly in the Bloomfield Avenue corridor. And that's the reason we proceeded now with an understanding that we will look at that this week. And I just wanted for clarification. So I respect where you landed, and I just wanted you to understand that that's a conversation we're going to engage in this week, and I hope we'll have those conversations together.
Well, and Mayor, let me just say this, because I've been waiting on here to do this vote, and I guess I must wait for another vote that people will want to see me vote for the skate park, which I support, but I need to know where we're going to get our resources. But I have a wife waiting for her 62nd birthday, and I'm going to leave now. I just want to say 80% of the people in this town supported legalizing cannabis, and I support it also. So don't let anybody mistake what I'm doing. I just was not clear on what we were doing and why we weren't going to wait another week to get this all done. So we'll work on it this week, I guess, and we'll try to work it all out together. God bless you all, and Christine says hello. Good night.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Christine.
Okay. Next, we have resolutions. Next resolution is R21-144. It's a resolution requesting approval for items of revenue and appropriation pursuant to N.J.S.A 40A:4-87, and I so move.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any questions, concerns, or comments? Seeing none, Madam Clerk?
Counselor Cummings?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Hurlock?
Yes.
Counselor Price Abrams?
Yes.
Counselor Russo? Counselor Schlager?
Yes.
Counselor Yacobelis?
Yes.
Mayor Spiller?
Yes. Next is resolution R21-145. Councilwoman Schlager, would you do the honors?
Of course. Thank you. Whereas invoices against the Township of Montclair in favor of the following persons for the amount set opposite their respective names have been received, duly audited, and found correct. Now therefore be it resolved by the Council of the Township of Montclair in the County of Essex that said invoices be, and they are hereby ordered paid, and that checks be drawn by the Finance Department to the order of such persons for the amounts respectively and hereinafter stated on the schedule attached hereto and made a part hereof. This bill list is dated July 13th, 2021, for the amount of $8,672,266.96. And I so move.
Second.
Seconded. Any questions, concerns, or comments on the bill list? Seeing none, Madam Clerk?
Counselor Cummings,
Yeah.
Deputy Mayor
Yes.
Hurlock,
Yes.
Counselor Price Abrams,
Yes.
Counselor Russo, Counselor Schlager,
Yes.
Counselor Yacovelis,
Yes.
Mayor Spiller.
Yes. Thank you. Mr. Karasik, I believe you have an item to introduce. It was inadvertently left off, and an item to just mention that was also left off, but if you don't mind.
Yes, I'll do that now. The first item is an item regarding the Bellevue Theater. There was some discussion this week, and this item actually got left off the Friday packet, but it was a resolution authorizing study to determine whether the block 1711 lot 38, which is the former Bellevue Theater, is an area in need of rehabilitation. The purpose of this resolution would be to allow just to authorize the planning department to take a look at the property, decide whether it meets the criteria under the statute, to be declared an area in need of rehabilitation, which gives us some flexibility in creating a plan to try to enable them to develop and save the theater. And it's a short resolution. If with the indulgence of the council, I believe Councilman Hurlock, who's his ward, supports this resolution and would. Deputy Mayor Hurlock, I'm sorry. And Deputy Mayor Hurlock, if you'd like me to read it.
Yes, Mr. Krasik, if you could, please. Thank you.
Okay, and it doesn't involve any additional expense for the county. It would be done by the planning department. Whereas the local redevelopment and housing law provides that the township council may by resolution determine pursuant to N.J.S.A 48-12A-14 that a proposed area may be suitable for a program of rehabilitation according to criteria set forth therein, subject to review and recommendation by the planning board. They just review it. They don't decide it. And whereas it is in the public interest to determine whether block 1711 lot 38 on the tax map, also known as 268 Bellevue Avenue, site of the former Bellevue Theater, but presently not utilized, meets the criteria for an area in need of rehabilitation. Now therefore be it resolved by the Township Council, Township of Montclair, Township Planning Department through the manager is directed to undertake a study pursuant to N.J.S.A 48:12A-14 to determine whether block 1711 lot 38 meets the criteria to be designated as an area in need of rehabilitation, and to report the findings and conclusions to the Township Council. The criteria are things like if the infrastructure is 50 years old, et cetera. So, I mean, this is something which should not be difficult. And it will come back to the council because the council would have to make the actual designation. So that's the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Krasik. Mr. Mayor, I so move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded, and I think Mr. Karasik spoke to it, but are there any questions, concerns, comments? Hearing none, it's not financial. Mr. Karasik, is it a voice vote on this one, or do we need a roll
voice
call?
vote would be fine.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, thank you. It passes.
The second item was discussed by the Education Committee and recommended by the Education Committee. It's a resolution authorizing the Montclair Environmental Commission to develop a climate action plan. And this item is a little bit, it's not so much complicated, but there's more to it. And I wanted, because this is a conference meeting and we should let the council, this is essentially a heads up for the council that this is an item that tend to be on the next agenda for the 20th. It will be distributed. In fact, I can send it out this evening, so you'll have it. Unless the council, if you want me to read it, I'll read it. If the council wants to move on it now, you're welcome to, but the intention was at least to just give you a notification. The idea of this, I guess, can be explained by someone in the education committee, but it's authorizing, well, I'll let someone.
Yep. So it's specifically being noted because much like the last one, it was asked to be included on this one, but missed the agenda for whatever reason. So that said, it'll be provided so everyone can review it. I think as Mr. Karasik noted, you can see it, but it basically looks at the education committee reviewing all of our environmental pieces, doing an assessment, certainly of the township writ large, and calling for any recommendations they would have in terms of utilizing green, green light structures, light fixtures. It goes through a number of different pieces, but basically the key pieces is doing an audit of greenhouse gas emissions, developing a climate action plan, looking at strategies to reduce emissions, and those are the big pieces that they have there, and they would be charged doing that work under this resolution. So that's an item people will receive. Again, it was supposed to be on for tonight. And again, vetted through and moved forward by the Education Committee. But you will see that next. All right, thank you, Mr. Karasik. Appreciate that, dropping those items. Mr. Stafford, would you like to begin on the discussion items, please?
Of course, sir. Item number 1, recently the Economic Development Committee evaluated various bicycle path options to provide improved non-vehicular access between Bay Street Station, the Montclair Center Business District, and resultantly recommended establishing a shared use path configuration along the south side of Glenridge Avenue.
Does everybody else hear this low? I can barely hear Mr. Stafford.
Yeah, I was going to say, Mr. Stafford, your volume level for us is somehow a little low. I'm not sure. Maybe you want to mute and then re-unmute, I guess, or something, just see if that does it. But we can hear you barely, but it's a little low.
Can you hear me now better?
Yeah, it's about the same, really.
Can you hear?
We were hearing you fine before, so I'm not sure what happened, but the technology. So if you want to just do one more try, or if you don't mind just speaking up, we can hear you, but if you maybe just speak up a little bit.
I certainly will. So further, the EDC requested that the township apply for a transit village grant to establish that shared use path on the south side of Glenridge Avenue between Pine Street and Grove Street. A council resolution, though, in support of the grant application is required and must be submitted by July 31st to qualify for the grant. Item 1 is a resolution that would accomplish the same.
May I comment on that, Mr. Stafford?
Sure.
For you, sir.
Thank you. So, this is just, and I think Ms. Talley's on the line too, to maybe give some more color to this overall. We have a master plan with the town. We have a safe, complete streets plan, and we have an ever-growing population and development downtown. And I think, at some point we have to have a serious conversation about what our approach to circulation is for people, for bicycles, for strollers, for people with walkers and wheelchairs, and of course cars as we grow. Roads are not getting any wider. So the question is, how do we make them smarter? How do we make them adapt to a growing population and changing behaviors? More people are walking, more people are riding their bikes than before. And how do we do that in high density areas like this? So, this is to go for a grant that would fund a pilot for one street that would not eliminate any parking whatsoever, that would connect our major transit hub to the site of Lackawanna Plaza, which we know will be a major residential development. So if nothing else, if just this piece went forward, you would at least have that. My true hope, though, is longer term that this could be a full south side of Glenridge Avenue shared use path that goes from the Bay Street train station up to Bloomfield Avenue. And I keep saying shared use because, if there are some design concepts that everyone, or at least EDC members, I don't know if everyone has received, I think everyone has received them, that show that this is not a bike path. It's not a hardscaped bike path. It's not a painted bike path. This is a 10-foot wide shared use path that can be used for any of those purposes I mentioned: walking, pushing a stroller, using, being in a wheelchair, and or riding a bike, that incorporates seating, benches along the way, that incorporates lighting, that incorporates greenery. And it's quite common in urban centers or dense centers like we are becoming, places like New Brunswick, Princeton, et cetera. So I just want us to have a bigger picture, longer term view of this, that at some point we do have to test this notion of at least a shared use path, if not a dedicated bike lane somewhere in town, and to check all the boxes to make as many stakeholders happy as possible is a very difficult task. And I will say, and maybe Ms. Talley can run through the list, there is tremendous support for this from the Peoples with Disabilities Committee to the Senior Citizens Advisory Committee to the Business Improvement District to, I believe, Save Montclair. Martin Schwartz is going to be submitting a letter in support of this, in addition to the Bike Walk Montclair people. So the fact that we have people who are constantly fighting with each other over doing something like this, in agreement to do something like this, I think speaks to the merit of doing something like this. And I feel pretty strongly about, like we're doing with cannabis and many other things, piloting it, testing and learning. If it doesn't work, at the worst, we've got a beautiful 10-foot, wide path that connects a major residential project to a major train station. And if the Essex Hudson Greenway, which does look like, at least folks are back at the table talking seriously about it, if that did come to fruition, we would be setting ourselves up to have a connection to that from downtown. So thank you.
Yeah, and I will speak to this in the fact that I actually met with the residents at Pine Ridge who had several questions about this and concerns. And so I think before we make decisions, I think residents should have just as much impact as anyone outside of them. And that's the other idea, is to talk to the residents who live in the neighborhood that will be most impacted. And on top of that, I think when we say test, I think, to go in to tear up this street, and I say tear up the street to design this, when we're going to have a development there who I think the developer has indicated, not only to myself, to Janice as well, that this is something that he would pay for. I think we can be prudent in first getting the input from the residents, the ones who live there, talk to them to let them know this is something that's being considered. And on top of that, have conversations, the fact that if we do it now, then once Lackawanna Plaza starts to get developed, are we going to be tearing the street back up and redoing it because of the development that's going to be used there? Whereas if the goal is to ultimately go all the way up to Glenridge Avenue, I don't see why we can't consider that location as a starting point to where, we'll have the parking deck done. And I think we'll also have a better understanding once the county fixes all the roads or the light structures that it's going to be doing over the next few months on Bloomfield Avenue. That is just something that we need to really discuss before we just determine we're going to do it here. And I emphasize having a conversation with the residents. So I will be back at Pine Ridge. Janice gave me some blow-ups to show the senior citizens there who, feel like they would like to have a say, because as you look at where we're looking to do this, they will be impacted as well as the folks who live in the residential apartments across the street. So I think, and then Peter, we had this conversation a while back when I said, if we're going to move on this, I think we need to have a conversation with the residents to alert them and get their thoughts on this. So, that to me is very important. And I hope this council will consider that, as opposed to, just saying, well, property owners are saying this. I think we really need to have a discussion with those residents.
Yeah, David, if I can too, I respect that. And I think, if we don't get the grant this year, we can go for the same grant again next year. And I mean that. But I am a local resident. I live a block from where this would be. And I could very easily walk around and get 25, 50 signatures from people who live right here, including Jose German, including James Cotter, and everybody, many folks in that neighborhood association. As a district leader for this district, I have a good sense of what the people right around here think and feel. But this, again, tonight is about just giving permission to go for a grant and see if we get it. And if we don't, we've got another year until we have that opportunity again. And maybe there's some other grants along the way, but that allows, I think, for us to continue the conversation. Because I hear you. I mean, the last thing I want is for there to be an impediment for a senior leaving the Pine Ridge residential building to get onto the street, right? This is actually meant to enable it and make this a safer experience for them, by giving them a wider space, wider access to get to points of interest. So, let's definitely keep having the conversation, but I do hope we can at least see if we can unlock some funds for something like this in the next year.
Yeah, but I go back to, again, Peter, and like I said to you, when we bring up things like this, we should talk to the residents. And you only talked to James because I told him to reach out to you, and he felt like he was supportive of it. But the point is, he's not the only residence, and that street isn't. And there's a lot of apartment buildings there that are, should know that this is something that's being done. And as someone who's lived in Montclair my whole life and not for 5 years, I know that is something we should talk to the people about, because again, when the word test is used with anything in the fourth ward, it leads to a conversation of, oh, we always get the short end of the stick. So again, I'm not against going for the grant, but I am against not talking to the residents before we pursue something like this.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody's saying we shouldn't talk to the residents about it. And I think there's plenty of time to do that in terms of developing a concept and before there's a shovel in the ground on something like this. But I also want to be mindful of where we have double standards, and we have infrastructure projects that are happening all over Montclair. And I don't see a requirement that we check in and get resident approval for most of those. We get announcements, and often businesses and residents are surprised by the infrastructure work that's getting done. And that's just the way we operate.
But you'll admit, the one thing I've been very consistent on in anything is getting resident approval.
Sometimes I don't think that's something that's completely consistent, but you and I can have that debate offline.
No, we've had that debate, and we could talk about it. And that's the one thing I've always said. And in fact, anyone on this council will know that's the one thing I've been consistent with, is talking to residents with anything that we do in their neighborhoods.
Well, yeah, and I agree. I think that's an important component, but I also think our model of government is that as a ward councilor and ward councilors, you are closer to the day-to-day interaction, and those of us at large are meant to also offer a balanced, hence at-large perspective on these things. And that's the rub, that's the debate. And that's, I think, the point of this democracy. And I think this is a very healthy dialogue to be having. So
yeah, but like I said, it's something that we started talking about in February, and then we don't have another discussion till now. And as we've had back and forth over email, I told you, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk to the residents. Said the same thing to Janice, and that to me is what I need to do, and that's what I will be doing. So until that, again, I understand the concept, and then the other thought, like I said, is considering doing something like this now and then having to take it all up because Lackawanna Plaza will then be developed. It seems where we could start up on Glenridge Avenue, where we don't have as much development that's proceeded for the next couple of years. And again, that's just me talking about the discussion of the grant money we can go after, but where we use it, I think we should discuss where it could be used initially without having to go back into turning up something in the ground that we didn't need to do in the first place. Because again, in my conversations, I think developers will be interested in taking on the cost of this particular section of the street.
Yeah, I would say I'm aligned with that. And I think, Mr. Plasik's been part of the conversation, and I know has submitted a letter in support of the grant, has talked about integrating the project into Lackawanna plans, but I'm completely aligned with you on, if we were to get this grant, considering another street closer to Bloomfield Avenue. That was actually, for me, the impetus to want to do this in the first place, knowing that when the Midtown deck is complete, we're meant to start that first strip from Forest to Bloomfield Avenue in terms of making the right turn only off of Bloomfield Avenue. And so I would prefer, frankly, if we started there, if that street is going to get done anyway, and we'd be looking at having to redo it anyway. So I'd like to, have the conversation with you and continue the conversation and see where our colleagues are at if we were able to get this grant.
Yeah, I think pursuing the grant is definitely something we should do, but I think pursuant to that, I'm not comfortable with designating this as the section to start this with. I think we should really look at where is the most prudent and best place to start it. And again, that's the conversation I'm having with the residents, and that's the conversation I'm having with the council. And this is the first discussion of this, so we have time to go back and forth a little bit more on this.
Ms. Talley, can you provide some clarity on the application process, the ability to change the street? Like what are our limitations there in terms of what you're presenting for the grant and what we can change or possibly change or not change if we were to get it? Or could we submit two options, for example, and could they choose to fund, one or the other?
I think we have to have a plan and a specific street to go with that proposal. This is an annual grant, and it's due July 1st is the application. The resolution is July 31st that I have to submit it by. But you have to have a specific street with a specific budget. You have to have the letters of support for that specific improvement. If you decide that you don't want to do this section of Glenridge Avenue, then we pull it and you wait to next year's grant opportunity for that section. So that's why we have to have our plans done in advance to submit with the application. And that's also why I'm doing it in phases. We already have funding set aside for the section of Glenridge Avenue between Bloomfield and Forest. We have CDBG funds for that. We can alter the plans based on how this falls out. The section over by Lackawanna Plaza, again, the intent was to hold off until we have a plan for Lackawanna Plaza because yes, Mr. Plasik has indicated support for providing for a bike path along that stretch of the road. So the focus here at this initial phase was really Bay Street to Grove Street because a shared bike lane along this stretch could be accomplished without any reduction in parking, which I thought was particularly important and would be a good first step to see how such a bike lane would be designed and laid out.
So Janice, two questions then. If we do this now, or we go through with this, and when that section of Lackawanna Plaza is built, are we going to have to replace this again?
No, because there's a break. Grove Street provides, actually, we could even do, my intent was that it would end approximately where Lackawanna Plaza, the project begins, which is where the driveway is right now, because we don't know exactly how it would be integrated into that project until we have a redevelopment plan. So where the Lackawanna Plaza project begins, then this bike lane would be fed in and integrated into the design of that project. And I don't think there would be any problem created by that, because you can transition between this project and what happens on Lackawanna Plaza.
Okay, so then the second question, you said bike lanes where Councilman Iacobello said a shared walking path. So is this the same thing but just different wording?
Yeah, it is, it's a shared use path. I should not have said bike lane because it's going to be for both pedestrians and bicyclists.
Okay. Well, again, like I said, I like to get more input from the residents. That's where I am on this. And so if that means wait a year, that's where I am. But I'm one of 7 or 6 tonight.
Janice, what happens if, what could we do if we went for the grant and then later decided we didn't want to do this stretch? How does that hurt us from a credibility perspective? What does that mean?
From what I've heard in the discussions I've had with people from DOT, they have a problem with people getting the grant and then not spending it. So they want to know that if you get the grant, you spend it. You do have 2 years to spend it, but if you get the money, they want to see that it's spent. And I guess that there's a little flexibility in terms of if you have to change the design, because clearly when you do the grant application, it's not designed. So there's some flexibility in how it's designed, but I don't think you can switch the location of the bike path or the shared use path.
Okay, so David, given that we can affect the design, and we would have 2 years to do that if we were to get the grant in the first place, is that something that you would be open to supporting?
I'm open to the grant. My point is I want the residents to have input. And so, Peter, we've had this conversation. This is something I think is worthy of pursuing. I eliminate any talk about the Essex Hudson Greenway just because that is in limbo no matter what. But for this right here, there are residents that I think need to be talked to. The first group that I spoke with were adamant that they wanted to know more, to the point I went right to Janice. I said, hey, can I get something that I could show them with? And who knows, when I show them this, they may say, oh, we're fine with that. Or they may say, so that's my point, is talking to the residents is the #1 priority for me.
Yeah. So could we then go for the grant knowing that we've got 2 years to spend the money? I don't know what the lead time is between spending it and designing it, but I would imagine that would give us a significant amount of time to have those conversations with residents to affect what the design would look like, which could just be, by the way, I would think, a beautified walking path with plants and benches.
I don't have any problem with that. I just want to make sure that we get residential input.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? No, sorry. How much is the grant for that we would be applying for?
I don't have the resolution in front of me right now. Do you?
Okay.
I apologize. I've got the details, but not the resolution. What did I put in?
It's okay.
It's $430,000.
Okay.
I have it here. Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yeah, I have the cost details. The cost details is $430,000.
So it's 400, and do we know approximately how much this project would cost?
The entire project from the train station up to Bloomfield Avenue is about $2.3 million. Okay, but we're looking to get that paid through grants and developer contributions.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions, concerns, or comments on item 1? Okay, Mr. Stafford.
Item number 2, since 2016, the township has held electronic tax sales for the sale of delinquent property taxes and municipal charges. The township would like to hold its 2021 tax sale in October, again electronically, given that doing so is efficient, provides a greater pool of potential buyers, and creates an environment for a more complete tax sale process. Item 2 is a resolution that would authorize the same. Item 3 is a resolution that would authorize the purchase of from Store Tractor Company of Branchburg, New Jersey, and through the Educational Services Commission of New Jersey pricing co-op system, a new Toro Groundsmaster four-wheel drive 72-inch deck mower at a cost of $45,186.37 to replace an existing 23-year-old unit that has exceeded its useful life and is completely out of service. Item 4 would authorize the township's application for and execution of a New Jersey Department of Transportation municipal aid grant for improvements to Highland Avenue, including milling, curbing, and paving. Item number 5, on April 23rd of 2019, following an appropriate request for proposals process, the township let a contract with Richview Consulting to provide arborist consulting services. That contract was for a 1-year period with options for the township to renew for 2 1-year periods. This item is a resolution that would, based upon the excellent service provided by the vendor, exercise the township's second option and extend the contract for a 1-year term in an amount not to exceed $82,368. Item 6, for several years and following appropriate requests for proposal processes, the township has engaged the Suburban Consulting Engineers firm in professional services contracts to provide engineering consultant services to the Department of Utilities. A request for proposals was issued in 2020, and the proposals received were analyzed. Based upon that analysis and the analysis of the performance, efficiency, and cost effectiveness of the Suburban Consulting Engineers firm, the governing body authorized the award of a 1-year contract to the firm to provide those services. That contract included a township option to extend the agreement for a 12-month period. Based upon the firm's performance to date, recommendation is made to, and this resolution would authorize that option for the period of July 20 of 2021, July 20 of 2022, in an amount not to exceed $100,000. Similarly, for several years, and again, following appropriate requests for proposals processes, the township has engaged the Gannett Fleming firm in professional services contracts to provide engineering consultant services to the Department of Utilities. An RFP was issued in 2020, and the proposals received were analyzed. Based upon that analysis and the analysis of the performance, efficiency, and cost effectiveness also of the Gannett Fleming firm, the governing body authorized the award of a 1-year contract to the firm to provide those services. The contract included a township option to extend the agreement for a 12-month period. Based upon the firm's performance to date, recommendation is made to, and this resolution would exercise that option for the period of July 20, 2021 through July 20 of 2022, in an amount not to exceed $135,000. Item number 8, pardon me. Since June of 2018, and again following appropriate RFP proposals or RFP processes, the township has engaged the Neglia Engineering Associates firm in professional services contracts to provide municipal engineering consulting services to the township. An RFP was issued in 2020, and the proposals received were analyzed. Based upon that analysis and the review of the performance, efficiency, and cost effectiveness of the Neglia Engineering Associates firm, the governing body authorized the award of a 1-year contract to the firm to provide the services. Based upon the firm's performance to date, recommendation is made to, and this resolution would exercise that option for the period of 1 year in an amount not to exceed $400,000. Item number 9, recently the township advertised for bids, more particularly bid number 21-05 for HVAC Services. Though one bid was received, the submitter failed to comply with the bid requirements in that it did not submit references and did not list subcontractors though both points were required by the specifications. In all bids, the township reserves the right to reject any and all bids as not being in the best interest of the township. As such, and based upon the aforementioned recommendation is made to, and this resolution would reject the bid received. Assuming governing body passage, the bid will be put on the street again. Item 10 is a grant insertion. Yes, ma'am.
Pardon me. So, Mr. Stafford, do we need to delay in giving you that instruction? We really have to hold this till next time? We can't, by some measure, give you that authority to go forward with the new?
You can take action on anything you'd like tonight.
Well, I'm going to ask my colleagues just that we would help expedite whatever this motion forward is. We don't need to hold it for a week, I don't believe.
As you noted, Councilwoman, would you like to so move?
I do move. I do so move.
All right. It's been moved. I'll second. Any questions, concerns, or comments? Okay, seeing none. I believe we'll probably need a roll call on this, Madam Clerk.
I just want to clarify, we're voting on item 9. I couldn't hear too well. Is it item 9 on the discussion list to reject the bid?
Yes, ma'am.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Cummings?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Hurlock?
Yes.
Counselor Price Abrams?
Yes.
Counselor Russo? Absent. Counselor Schlager?
Yes.
Counselor Yacovelis?
Yes.
Mayor Spiller?
Yes.
So back to item number 10.
And Mr. Stafford, just a reminder to almost yell because you are getting pretty quiet now too. It's like I think you're gonna get pulled
my
up.
family just called me and told me they can hear me at home.
Well,
Item 10 is a grant insertion, and its resolution would serve as the township's request to the state of New Jersey. I think Mr. Fan is playing a joke on me. And the Department of Community Affairs Director of the Division of Local Government Services to approve the insertion of this grant in the referenced amount as both an item of revenue and an appropriation in our 2021 budget. There is no local match required for this grant. Item 11, applicants for development projects are required to deposit funds in escrow. The projects listed on the schedule have been determined for all intents and purposes to be sufficiently complete, denied, or having been withdrawn, and all relevant fees have been satisfied, and as such there appears no reason or further basis to retain the escrow deposits listed on the schedule. The resolution would authorize their release and would direct our Chief Financial Officer to issue checks to the applicable developers. Item 12 is a resolution supporting the establishment of a permanent skate park.
I'm sorry, with all due respect, can I chime in here? Thank you, Mayor and Manager. I would like this evening, if we can, is if we could vote on this resolution. As we all know, the skate park that has been up and running for over a year and a half is very well received, highly utilized. In order to go forward with applying for grants to firms, foundations, contributors, the 501c3 component of this skate park, Skate Essex, in order to apply for these grants, they need this resolution to go hand in hand with their grant applications. So they have a couple of opportunities that are coming up quick. So I was hoping that we could vote on this evening, and so that they could have it as soon as possible. So I'd like to move this forward this evening. Are there any?
It's thank you. Maybe second, Mr. Stafford, maybe while we do this, if you don't mind, checking your audio settings to see if your microphone, which one that is, or maybe having Mr. Fan kind of work with you, because it is kind of tailing off a little. And I want you, by the end of this, you're going to have no voice. So if you can, maybe while we discuss this, can have him looking at that, because we'll be a second here. But so thank you, Councilwoman, for kind of laying that out and why it's been moved. Is there a second?
I'd like to second that, Mayor. And just a couple quick comments. I think this is one of those things, I know most of you agree that it's a differentiator from Montclair, both in terms of quality of life, adding value, I think, to the neighborhood, to the town, to people's homes, to the experience of life. I think it's also a really cool way for us to get integrated into the global, skating community. There are small skate parks around Montclair, but we have an opportunity to do something, I think, really, really cool. And I think we should, and I think we only have one opportunity to do it right. I think, we've seen some initial analysis, although informal, that, tennis could be absorbed with all the other facilities around town, county, municipal, private. And there are scenarios, and all scenarios protect the current basketball court. And I think, we would always want to do that and possibly even expand the basketball court there as well as a great option. And the last thing I'll mention too is I think just for any concerned residents that I think sound mitigation or noise mitigation will be a part of any plan here.
Yes.
Or you're talking about a wall or arborvitaes or whatever is necessary in terms of bordering any residential property, but then also the design of the skate park itself, if and when that were to come to fruition in the future, would be designed in a professional way where it was intended to absorb the sound. So I'm proud to second this and help Skate Essex with their endeavors to raise grants and funding.
Well, certainly, thank you both. Appreciate that. It's moved. I'll just also add, first and foremost, Mr. Karasik, an appreciation. I know that as part of the discussion, reaching out to you to help craft something that would, provide them what they need to help raise the dollars that both Councilwoman Schlager and Councilman Jacobellis noted, but also protect the township in terms of, fiscal liability or other pieces to show we are committed and to show we would love to see this for all the reasons described, but also financially making sure it's viable and that, we're protecting all the interest there. I think you really found that balance and we're able to come up with something there. So I know you put some time into that, Mr. Karasik, and certainly that's appreciated. I think you found what we needed. So, and navigated that. So I want to thank you for that, and certainly echo my council colleagues' comments in terms of, from the start, I know everyone here is supportive of the work that is going on, and certainly myself included, although not that good on a skateboard, certainly do enjoy everyone out there having fun and enjoying themselves. So I think this is something that we all would love to move forward on, and it's as is normally the case. There are pieces to work out, and a big one is financial. So happy to see that this will help them to raise some dollars, which will help this project become a reality, sooner than later. So with that, we've all seen the language there and why that is structured that way, and it's been moved and seconded. So with that, are there any questions, concerns, or comments?
Just a point of clarification, Mr. Mayor. So this particular resolution has no allocation of township taxpayer funds at this moment, correct?
That is correct, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I back up. So considering some of the things I've discussed, potential increase in the basketball court, and then whatever money Skate Essex comes up with, do we have any idea what the total cost would be and what may be required for the township to get this done? Because I don't assume we're asking him to raise all the money.
Well, as it's kind of laid out in the resolution that you'll see there, but some of that in the loose discussions that I've heard, and certainly my colleagues can chime in on this as well, I've heard numbers anywhere from a lower end of about $1 million to a higher end of about $3 million, right? So I think that's the order of magnitude that you're talking about for some of this work. When you're talking about fundraising, the conversations that have been had have been at least or more a third in grants, at least or more a third in fundraising, leaving then the township to work to try and get county dollars and other dollars to make up that last piece. So that's the discussion loosely, but again, none of it, as the deputy mayor just noted, is a specific financial commitment. But what it is an opportunity for them to have a a clear statement of interest from this council that Montclair is interested in helping in some way, and allow them to build their fundraising off of that. Certainly, if they're able to fundraise, $2 million off of this rather quickly, I'm obviously, know that's not easy. If they're able to fundraise those $2 million, maybe it's something we can move forward with sooner than later. And of course, there's less of a town impact at all in terms of cost. So it's not defined, but it shows the commitment.
I would ask that, and Janice, if she's gone, Ms. Talley, to see if this is potentially an area that could be eligible for CDBG funds.
Great idea.
Just because we were able to identify that potentially for another property in the township that I think we're going to be able to successfully get done. And then I'd also like to understand Skate Essex is raising funds for the skate park, but if we do talk, because that basketball court is heavily used as well, and it's not regulation size. So would that be something that would fall on us to basically fill out?
Yeah, and I would say it's all in the conversation around what happens there, right? If you're talking a million, Councilman, it was limited in what would happen there, right? So it's not a broad, expansive modification of the space. If you're talking 3 million, that's a totally different story, right? So some of it would be that conversation about how far and wide, but it would also note, money's money. It depends on how much we want to put in. Is that going towards the broader project that includes what you're talking about in terms of the court improvements and expansion? It absolutely could, right? I think that's at our, I think at the core of what the deputy mayor is noting, that's going to be at our discretion or future council's discretion, depending on how that fundraising goes and the speed of which, to determine what we want to invest.
Yeah, no, I'm going to ask Janice about the CDBG as the rep for them, because I think that may even support them not having to raise as much money. So, that's just something I'm going to explore. And
That's a great idea. That's a great idea, Counselor. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, Rob.
Yeah.
Any other questions, concerns, comments? All right, it's been moved and seconded. There isn't a financial piece, as was noted by the deputy mayor. So all in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? And for that one, for the purposes of, I know the young gentleman who was on earlier and everyone else who's looking for this to fundraise from, I will have it without objection noted as a unanimous vote. That way they can, emphasize that for fundraising purposes. All right, thank you. Mr. Stafford.
Councilor Russo also did add his vote earlier, essentially, so.
Thank you. Councilman Russo. Mr. Stafford, if you can.
Thank you. Item 13 is a resolution that would authorize execute.
Sound a lot better, Mr. Stafford. You got to tone it down now. I hear you. Sound a lot better. We can hear you loud and clear. Thanks.
Item 13 is a resolution that would authorize execution of the annual shared services agreement with the Montclair Board of Education, whereby the board contracts with the township for the provision of a school resource officer for the 2020-2021 school year. Item 14, the Essex Regional Health Commission was formed in 1967 and through shared services offers cost-efficient regional programs working in close coordination with Essex County's local health departments. From each of the 13 participating municipalities, including this township, an appointed commissioner serves on the ERHC's governing body. This appointment is made by the township's governing body, and since August 16 of 2002, the township's appointed commissioner has been Sue Portoez. Given Ms. Portoez's planned retirement, I recommend appointing Acting Health Officer Keith Costello. Mr. Costello is fully familiar with the ERHC, having served as Cedar Grove appointed commissioner based upon the two townships' health services shared services agreement. Please note that, of course, if the governing body so appoints Mr. Costello, he will no longer serve in that capacity for Cedar Grove, as he will be representing our township. Item 14 is a resolution that would make that referenced appointment. Item 15 is an ordinance that would amend Chapter 297 of the Township Code, Streets and Sidewalks, more particularly Article 8, Section 59, honorary street designations by designating that portion of Pine Street between Claremont Avenue and Grant Street as Aquilonia Way.
Mr. Sefford, if I can interrupt in the spirit of efficiency, as we've done a couple of these so far tonight, I'm going to ask that we go ahead and I'd like to move that, Mr. Mayor, and pull it. And I know there's some people still on the phone who called in earlier who have been waiting very patiently for us to get to this one. So I would like to move item 15, please.
Sure, it's been moved, and I will second it.
Thank you.
Would you like to? I think it is pretty self-explanatory, but would you like to speak to it at all?
If I could, just a little bit. Even though my last name is Herlock, I'm very proud of my Italian heritage. I am more Italian than I am anything else, just for the record, as my mother is 100% and her maiden name is Della Poli. And we've had a great relationship with the sister city, as Mr. Marzullo and Ms. Marzullo had mentioned earlier. As many of you know, former Mayor Jackson, former Councilor McMahon, myself, former Deputy Chief Frisano, and former clerk, Linda Wannett, all went over as part of the exchange program 3 or 4 years ago. And I'm concerned now because every one of those people are formers except me. So what did I do wrong? But we've done a lot of work together. They came over in October, did the Italian exchange. My son and I went and visited them 2 years ago, right before the pandemic. And we've got a great relationship. Look forward to moving that forward. We're working with Montclair State, as Miss Marzullo had mentioned as well. So I'm very proud of this ordinance, and thank you, Mr. Mayor.
If I could, I'd like to comment as well, Mayor, if that's okay. So just for the record as well, because I get this all the time, Deputy Mayor, I know you can relate to this. Everyone thinks I'm Greek. I am not Greek. No offense. I love Greek food, but I am 100% Italian. All of my great-grandparents emigrated from Italy, and I grew up in Queens, and we had a village feel. And when I'm walking around the neighborhood here in Pine Street, I look out my window and I could see Our Lady of Mount Carmel's bell tower, and I can hear the bells. It reminds me of being in Queens and my heritage that, you know, I had the pleasure of having in the 1980s, where all of my family lived in one place, in one town. We all lived in apartment buildings right around each other and all crowded around our Catholic church. And so it's very reminiscent of what I grew up with and what I haven't had since. What I'm frankly trying to, you know, build here with a new start in this town as of a few years ago. So I'm just really proud and excited to support this, Deputy Mayor. I know this is something that you're passionate about, Councilor Russo and others. I think this is great, and I can't wait to visit Aquilonia, hopefully with you one day.
Thank you. I look forward to that. Thank you.
Mayor, I just want to add that Raf, his sister, and his brothers are truly what we call crosstown residents, which is what the whole area has been known as in Montclair, where the African Americans and Italians going back to the 50s and 60s really played together. And there's a lot of family history there, from the DiGeronimos to the Marzullos, the Capones. And, you know, Raf and his sister have just kept it up. And their moms, they're just really good people. Mount Carmel is a church that has a tremendous history in the township. And I think this, you know, as Councilman Herlock and Councilor Iacobellis have both talked about, this is a cool thing to do, just because that family and what it's done over the years, for them to ask, you want to deliver, because they truly do speak for that entire community. So I know the whole crosstown group, they should all be happy right now, because this is a good way to recognize their heritage and that part of town. So kudos, and, you know, as Fourth Ward Councilor, it's great to be able to be a part of this.
All right. Any other questions, concerns, comments? It's been moved, and I did second, and I certainly would echo everything that's been said. I think that we're all pretty excited about this. We know the relationship, both the relationships that we have here and the relationships with our sister city, you know, all connected. But couldn't speak more highly. Agreed, as you both did, about those relationships. So I want to thank everybody and their involvement. And let's vote. It's been moved and seconded. It is an ordinance, so I imagine, Mr. Krasik, as it's an ordinance and we've just moved it up and introduced here, I assume, roll call on this one?
Yes, it would. We should do a roll call, and there isn't a problem by introducing it since it will be scheduled for public hearing. And
okay, great. Madam Clerk?
Counselor Cummings,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Hurlock,
Yes.
Counselor Price Abrams,
Yes.
Counselor Russo, absent. Counselor Schlager,
Yes.
Counselor Yacovelis,
Yes.
Mayor Spiller.
Yes. Mr. Stafford, back to you.
Thank you, sir. In the 2021 operating budget, this governing body allocated funds to provide for various capital enhancements to our water and sewer utilities. Items number 16 and 17 are the fully funded ordinances that will facilitate the spending of those allocated funds. And Mayor, I'm sure you have a comment about those two ordinances, but before you do, I will say that's all I have.
Well, thank you, Mr. Stafford, and I do, only because I think it's important to highlight, great kudos to everyone here. Certainly the work that's been set up prior as well, Mr. Stafford, to you and the team. But again, it's another example financially of us moving forward with significant investments, but not increasing debt by one dime in doing this work. It took us a long time to get to this point. Those who've been on this ride for a while know, the millions and millions we've reduced in debt, but along the way also, making sure we've got dollars put aside to continue to do the work. When you look at the dollar amounts that we're talking about here, but also knowing that we're not putting any of this on our debt, on our books as debt, it really is impressive, and certainly want to offer that as a well done job by this council. Kudos. It's gonna. Everyone talks about the impact and what we leave for our kids and grandkids. I mean, we are, really being financially prudent in all these type of actions and leaving this as a better place for them. So really proud of that, as I know we all are. But Mr. Stafford, again, thank you to you and your team as well for making sure we're continue to be on the forefront of this kind of work. All right. So I'll look forward to that as we move forward. All right, so we have a review. We had a review of all those items and covered all the other items on the agenda. While I am aware of the hour, I will go around the horn and see if we have any comments. Mr. Stafford, anything else?
No, sir, I have nothing to add.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Deputy Manager?
Nothing, Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Attorney?
No, I've said enough tonight. Thank you.
Madam Clerk?
No report, thank you.
Sounds good. Deputy Mayor?
Just real quick, Mr. Mayor, it's late. I'm going to be very, very quick, and I appreciate everyone's efforts tonight. Two things of importance this last couple weeks. I know Mr. Mayor, Councilor Cummings, and Councilor Russo, we were at the ribbon cutting for the Bellevue Avenue Library, which was a fantastic event. Hopefully that's our last ribbon cutting there and it stays open forever and ever, at least while we're in office. And I want to thank my colleagues for their support on the extra monies that were allocated to get that up and running again. And then also, Mr. Mayor, the task force that you've assembled for the school reopening, we've been meeting diligently. We've got another meeting coming up. We had one last week. And again, thank you for your appointment to that committee. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. And I'll just note, it was great to join you for the library piece. I'm sure Councilman Russo would offer the same, and I'm sure Councilman Cummings will note it. But it was great to be there. We all echoed, I think, the same sentiments. Last ribbon we want to cut on that space. But it was, really, it is, as you know, an important piece in the community, and we're all happy here collectively to be able to put additional dollars to be able to get that back open. So really, that's a testament to the great work of everybody here. Well done, and thank you for that comment and update on that full-time task force. I think that's important work, and I also know that through the work you guys are going to do, and certainly I know from the chair there, that she is and you are committed to also, having broad open meetings where there can be input and all of those pieces as you guys are working through. So thanks for your work on that, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Appreciate it. Councilwoman Schlager.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
All right. Councilwoman Price Abrams.
I'll say thank you and a good night to everybody. I think I'm toast.
Councilman Cummings.
Oh,
wait a minute.
I will say that the library event was a lot of fun, but I also admit that having to walk into town hall to participate because my Wi-Fi was down at home, I thought of you all. So that's why I did not sit in my seat in the council chambers, just because I thought it would be unfair. So I came upstairs to the conference room, but I have a challenge for everyone here. It is time for the council photo. We are all vaccinated. We can all get together and get that done. So Mayor, I'm leading the charge on you to set the date to get that done. That's all for tonight.
All right, fair. Well, you heard the gauntlet there. So everybody mark your calendars. We're going to give enough time for everybody to get the haircuts, trimmed up to look good, to be ready. And we'll put it on the calendar so everybody is ready for that. So
Okay.
with all seriousness, Mr. Stafford, I know, Madam Clerk, I know you guys work on that a little bit. Well, maybe, Angelise, but, together work on scheduling that. So we'll have a conversation there, but thank you both. Thank you, Councilman Cummings. Councilman Yacobelis.
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to lose 5 more pounds before that picture. I think I commented pretty heavily throughout the night tonight. So just thank you all. I mean, we're all obviously, intersecting with each other in different ways, and I think it continues to fascinate me and energize me and disappoint me sometimes. How we line up on things, and I'm enjoying the work, and I'm enjoying working with all of you for all of the lessons and for all the things that we're doing as well. So thank you. Have a good night.
All right, thank you, sir. And I will just quickly add, to what everyone said and not said, I'll just quickly add kudos to the committee that worked on the July 4th caravan. I know that they, hustled to make sure we had something there. It was great to see many of you able to participate in that. And just as importantly, honoring and recognizing our frontline responders during all of this pandemic. That's important. We can't say that enough. So a big thank you to each and every one of them. And certainly also want to mention to Mr. Dan Gill, a 51-year educator. And I say that again, 51 years as an educator who certainly helped to lead the parade and got to speak. A few of us got to hear him speak. It was just, even then giving just a wonderful lesson. So I want to say to him, thank you for the difference that he makes in the lives of so many generations with students. So congratulations, Mr. Gill. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, everybody. See everyone soon. Have a good one. Bye-bye.